Mundosa by Ryan Shukas. Narrated by Ryan Shukas. Chapter 1. Sorry for being so coarse. Regret was a word Marfé Lavisa had long surpassed, nearly 2 months ago when she and her husband Nathaniel had escaped New Orleans. It wasn't his idea, and it wasn't Marfé's. Nathaniel followed along, and in turn they found themselves battling the wilderness for 60 days. While they both nearly starved to death, Marfé lost her left eye to marauders in the woods of Arkansas. Nathaniel's stutter may have been the cause due to their delay in response to their demands. In turn, he lost his ring and index fingers on his right hand, along with some bullet wounds and a knife wound to his back and hips. But pain was an old friend. Both of their backs were thick with scars from decades of whiplashes. They considered themselves lucky they lived during the ratification of the 13th Amendment. They'd been free for 12 years. Freedom was a broad term. It didn't mean they were free to leave the New Orleans. Why did they go, you ask? The question is a good one and very simple. They escaped looking for the lost city of Mundosa, the city of rebirth, where seldom dreams are rewarded in silver and far more. Marfé was running through inky black caverns, thinking of that word again, regret. She was muttering to herself how she hated that word. A large silver six-barreled revolver was nestled in her right palm, her finger furiously tapping the trigger. The rags of clothing hanging from her flesh had been her last big purchase before their journey. Bruises and cuts covered her face and body, and she appeared undead, stomping her boots into the sand and dirt with adrenaline, anger, and provocation. A gas lantern dangled in her left hand, lighting the way. The tunnels looked to have gone on for miles. She heard her husband's moans. "Nathaniel, do you hear me? Keep talking, Nathaniel. I hear you. Close your eyes and listen to my voice." A small thin line of blood darkened the dirt, snaking around boot tracks. "You better be alive, you stupid son of a bitch. You're not dying of me today. Not today." The sounds of her husband's moans intensified as she rounded the corner and found him. He was lying against a pile of human skeletons, rancid flesh, and ragged clothing. Nathaniel bobbed his head back and forth. Holstering her revolver, she bent her knees down as she peered into his vacant face. "I'm here. Can you walk? Not if you can walk." Nathaniel struggled to keep his eyes open, and his face was pale as his dark curly beard consumed his quivering mouth. "It hurts too much, and I'm afraid to put weight on it." "Did you run out of bullets?" "I did. Shot everything I had." Marfé looked around the cavern. It was breathing. A gust of wind blew through and shot her head up like a prairie dog. Her muscles tensed throughout her body. Then, submerged in equanimity, she lowered her head and peered into her husband's eyes. She was whispering to him as softly as she could. "Once I stop speaking, we're gonna move. No negotiations. I'm gonna put my arm under yours. I will lift you and I will drag you as quickly as I can. We will not look back. Take a moment." Marfé gave Nathaniel a brief pause. He sat there in the darkness, resting on rancid human flesh. The air was putrid. If she sat there a minute longer, vomit would fill her throat. Gagging a little, she readjusted herself. It had been 15 seconds Nathaniel sat, breathing and relaxing. His shoulders drew back. His head hung like a vulture. She nodded as she put her arm around his. "Here we go. Let's go, Nathaniel. Up! That's it. Here we go." Nathaniel's left leg was bleeding badly, and it hurt to put too much weight on it. Marfé was giving all her strength to lift him and drag him forward. Nathaniel stuttered as his lips hung from his sunken cheeks. "We're not stopping, Nathaniel. Now stop stuttering and focus on moving forward. We still have a long way to go." A loud bark echoed from the darkness behind them. It was far. Whatever it was, it sounded big. The wound on Nathaniel's leg wasn't from a gunshot. "Come on, honey, let's quicken the pace. I've got you." "It's coming!" Nathaniel belched. "Stop that, please. Move faster. I can see moonlight." It was small and very dim, but white moonlight pooled at the very end of the cavern. A smile wrapped around Marfé's face as sweat beaded on her brow. A low guttural pant began to echo continuously behind them, as if some giant demon from hell was springing down the tunnel after them. Nathaniel limped faster as Marfé urged his body forward, their footsteps outlined in his blood. If she managed to get him out, she would have to address the wound quickly, or else he would bleed to death. The moonlight was growing brighter. They were nearly there. She heard the beast behind them. It was growling and drooling in the dark as it hooked its claws in the dirt, striding its way up to them. Marfay could smell the hot breath coming from its rancid mouth. The moonlight beamed down on them, 10 feet away from the opening, and they couldn't move any further. The beast had them. Marfay stopped and held Nathaniel. Then, taking the gas lamp from him, she held it up. "Wait for me outside. I'll be right behind you." Nathaniel stopped and turned to her, gaping at her with unblinking white eyes. No, please don't. We can make it. We just have to keep going." "We cannot. I have to face the devil myself. Please go. Please wait for me at our camp. Go." Marfay kissed Nathaniel hard on the lips as he turned around, staring at her. "Go, Nathaniel." She raised her silver revolver and aimed towards the darkness. Nathaniel limped out of the cave and swam in the moonlight. Running over to a large boulder, he took a knee and waited. Ripping off the remains of his shirt, Nathaniel made a bayonet around the wound, hoping to hold back the blood. Looking up, he saw the cave entrance illuminated with light, as he heard Marfay give off several gunshots with quick flashes of light. A ghastly, bear-like roar rang from the cave. Then there was silence. Nathaniel heard footsteps. Marfay emerged from the cave, running for her life as the devil was upon her. Nathaniel saw his wife run in the dark twilight of the moon, bright stars shining above as a shadow of a beast was hot on her heels. Beside the boulder was their camp, and the fire was still blazing. Hopping over, Nathaniel grabbed a fiery piece of firewood from the pit. Holding it up like a torch, he vomited a loud, gut-wrenching scream. As his wife tripped and fell in the dirt, the shadow stopped. He could see it turn its head, staring at Nathaniel in the dark with glowing white eyes. A deep guttural grunt poured from the darkness as it huffed and took charge of for Nathaniel. Marfay dragged her fingers through the dirt as she lifted herself, groping the night for any sign of her husband. Then she saw him glowing by the fire pit. His scream pierced her eardrums as the beast turned and charged. Digging through the dirt for her revolver, she found it and cocked the hammer as she squeezed the trigger. She was firing off her last 3 bullets into the darkness. The beast emerged into the light of the campfire. It was a bear that looked to be the great descendant of a sewer rat. Its massive, huge shoulders sat on powerful arms that dug into the earth, projecting it forward. It was about 3,000 pounds, with a long, naked, wormy tail trailing behind it. Wide eyes furrowed at him as a long, horse-like snout with large rat teeth gaped like a crocodile. A prong-like crown of twisted horns stuck outward from its forehead, ready to pierce anything in sight. Nathaniel held the burning piece of firewood and swung it into the creature's face with a mighty thwack. The beast fell to the side and charged off into the darkness, whining and growling as its face melted to the fiery embers embedded within its cheeks. A whiz sounded in the air as Nathaniel felt something hit him. Collapsing to the ground, he struggled to lift his head. Marfay sprinted to him, holstering her revolver. Wrapping her arms around his head, she held him as she looked down to his belly. 2 bullet wounds pumped blood out of his body, all over his shirt, and one must have hit the beast that still screamed out in the dark. Nathaniel's eyes rolled up in his skull as he struggled to breathe. "You stupid shit. I told you to ignore the noise and go back to sleep. You had to go investigate. Remember how you lost your fingers? You always have to investigate." "You shot me." "I'm sorry." Tears began to pour from her eyes onto Nathaniel's face. "I don't mean to be so coarse. I just wish you hadn't done it." "I know, honey. But you know me. I like to investigate. Maybe I should have been a detective." Nathaniel started to laugh as blood splurted from his mouth. Marfay bent down and kissed his forehead. "You may be a stuttering bastard, but you would have been the best detective in the West. Get yourself out of here. That thing is going to come back. I know you put bullets in me, but I was done for when that thing chewed on my leg. I wouldn't have made it regardless. I wanted to enter Mundosa holding your hand by my side. We are one that can never be undone. That's what you said when we married." Marfay could barely keep from mumbling. She was crying too hard. "That doesn't mean death will separate us. We are one, but from now and forever. Don't forget. You said that too." Nathaniel gave a weak smile. "Go to Mundosa. Sweetheart, don't give up. Do it for me. Nathaniel took his last breath. Then he died right there at 3:34 in the morning on March 21st, 1877. Marfay slept through the scorching heat, and the buzzards that flew around her pecked at her and Nathaniel. She woke up to a man rummaging through her tent, scrounging about their belongings. Whipping out her revolver, she aimed it at the tent and yelled through cracked lips, "Come on over there quietly, and I ain't dead yet." Out came a man, a white man, who looked perplexed. She was alive. "Name's Northwood. Rick Northwood. Apologies, ma'am. I thought you and your husband were dead since those vultures were picking at you." "My husband is dead, yes, but I ain't. I've been conversing with God, but the devil is the only one I'm making deals with." "You're only a few miles away from the legendary Mundosa. Would you like me to take you there? You and your husband?" "Thank you, and I apologize for being so coarse. Unfortunately, I don't meet very many kind white men such as yourself. However, the last white man I encountered took my eye." "Not many white men are like me, and I'm sorry for your loss. But as you know, Mundosa is the city of rebirth, starting over, and there is plenty to go around." "I'm sorry to trouble you. Do you have any Marfay passed out right there as the young man moved to catch her, bring her over to his horse. He set her down and pulled out his canteen. He poured some water on Marfay's lips. She was startled awake to the cold water splashing against her face. Greedily she drank as she smacked her lips. Burping a little, she fell over and passed out. Rick picked her up and laid her out on his horse as he dug a shallow hole to bury her husband. Sounds of loud voices awoke her as her swollen eyes struggled to open. Shadow spilled over her body as she felt cooler. Lifting her head, she looked forward to see a large wooden gate within the entrance of a canyon. Rick was chatting with a fellow in a very tall tower. She couldn't make out what they were saying, but before she knew it, the front gates opened. Rick jumped back up into his saddle and glanced over to Marfay. "Hey there! You woke up just in time. Where are we?" "Welcome to Mundosa." They rode forward through the wooden gate as she saw a large sign to her right that read Mundosa, the land of seldom wealth. As they rode in, voices grew in her ears. The gates closed behind them, and she saw things that she wished Nathaniel could see. 3 guards checked their horse and questioned Rick. After they finished, they let him proceed down Elmhurst Ave. They were sunburnt, dehydrated, and exhausted as the townsfolk stared at them. Then, one by one, they glanced, gathered, and whispered as Marfay and Rick rode by. She saw gunslingers and bounty hunters giving them side glances as they absconded from their view. Soldiers patrolled the streets while mothers admonished their children. Riding down Elmhurst, they turned onto Cherry Oak and then left onto Main Street. They rode through the main square around the Hangman's Noose. Hundreds of people passed them by every second. It was difficult for Marfay to take it all in. They rode by the courthouse, the library, the meeting hall, the Diamondback Casino, the Prickly Peach Saloon, and the Yellow Buckhorn. Marfay's companion, Rick, struggled to maneuver around so many people when they finally made it to Copperhead. Taking a right, they rode to Blue Toe. Then they took another right, passing the post office and the Fire Blossom Saloon. They stopped at the Red Star Hotel. Rick tied his horse to a water trough, helping Marfay off the horse and onto her feet. Rick grabbed his satchel. Patting his horse in valediction, he helped Marfay into the hotel. She stumbled as she struggled to walk, still exhausted and dehydrated. Walking up to the front desk, Marfay leaned on it as her companion handled the transaction. Coming in and out of consciousness, she heard only a little of what Rick was saying, speaking a long list of requests, including a room, lodging for his horse, a full meal, a bath, and several other things that all ended with him slapping a large single silver coin onto the counter. It landed with a loud ping as their host scampered their clammy hands for the coin and guided them to their room while giving orders to his lobby boys. Climbing the steps to the next floor, Rick carried Marfay most of the way. Before she understood what was happening, she was splayed upon a soft bed, sleeping away her worries as she swam upon seldom dreams. Chapter 2. Unfinished. Marfay was startled awake, wiping her face as she looked around. The room was empty, and there was 2 beds side by side. Rick was gone, although his belongings still resided upon his mattress. Water steamed from a recently drawn bath that stood in the corner. Next to her on the nightstand was a plate full of food. Someone had a lucky assumption she would wake up today. Grabbing the plate of food, she stuffed the biscuits, eggs, ham, and everything else in sight down her sore throat. She alleviated herself in the water closet and took a bath, wincing in pain as she brushed over bruises, cuts, and swollen flesh. Folded on the writing desk in the corner sat a fresh pair of clothes. Drying herself off, Marfay threw on the clean fabrics. Buckling herself together, she snapped her holster to her belt. Examining her revolver, she snapped open the barrel. "Ah, shit," mumbling to herself as she realized she was out of bullets. Glancing out the window, she saw the streets filled with people. Chatter filled the air as she smiled and turned to the door, wincing in pain as she shot her hand to her left eye. She feared how it looked underneath. Reaching for the door handle, Marfay saw it open by itself, revealing Rick on the other side. "Oh, good morning, Marfay. Did you, sleep well?" Northwood's face was completely black, covered in coal dust. His clothes were filthy, and he was carrying a heavy sack over his backside. Stepping aside, Marfay let him in as he dropped his bag next to his bed and sat down out of breath. "Yes, I can't thank you enough. Are you alright?" Marfay took a seat on her bed as she watched Rick wash the coal dust from his face. "Never better." Rick patted the dust out of his clothes as he sat back down on his bed. Marfay hadn't taken in Rick's face in the last 24 hours. Northwood was a young man in his early 30s, silky black hair with brown eyes and rosy pink cheeks, with a dash of dark stubble covering his perfect jawline. A small mole above the corner of his mouth moved every time he spoke. A good amount of muscle covered his tall body. Large, strong hands brushed his hair back as he looked to her with an ivory smile. "What is it you've been doing?" "I'm not sure if you were able to read up on Mundosa during your travels, but every person who steps through their gates has the privilege of filling their pockets with silver." Rick opened his sack and revealed it was full of charcoal-dusted silver. He had been mining all yesterday afternoon and all morning today. "As long as you give 20% of your findings to the town, you can walk out of Mundosa wealthier than you walked in. Anyone is allowed in Silvertooth Mines up until nightfall." "What happens at nightfall? Do they close it?" "Well, you could say that. How do you feel?" "I feel good. I wanted to ask if you could point me out to a doctor in town. I have some aches and pains. I lost my eye not too long ago. It would ease my consciousness if a doctor could take a look at it." "Of course, I'll come with you and make sure things are all in order." Rick finished washing his face and patted off his clothes as he stood up. Moving to the door, Marfay trailed behind him as he made his way down the hotel staircase, the boards creaking with every footfall. "Wait, aren't you going to lock your door?" "Nope." Rick kept walking forward. "Aren't you afraid someone will steal all your silver and possessions?" "Marfay, my dear, no one locks their doors in Mundosa. No need to steal that which everyone already has." Marfay chuckled to herself at the thought as she continued following Rick. A town that doesn't lock its doors because no one steals anything doesn't sound possible, Marfay thought to herself as they stepped out the front door of the hotel on Bluto. Turning left, they walked down, passing the sheriff's office, Father McCall's church. Then they turned right down an alleyway, passing the gunsmith. Then, Marfay noted, walking a little more, passing the bathhouse and the journal, to Dr. Graham's quarters. Stretching out his arm, Rick knocked on the front door below the sign that read, Dr. Graham. Summoning from inside, Graham came wobbling out to greet them, peering at them through a small window in his door. He opened it an inch as an eyeball looked out to them. "Appointment?" "No, sorry, no service." The door was about to slam shut, but Rick stuck his boot in the gap, keeping it open. They could hear Graham struggling on the other side. "I've got a few narcotics that might interest you." Do you have some each and C?" "I might. Would that be enough for you to treat my friend?" "Let's take a look first." Graham opened the door as Rick dug into his coat pocket. Marfay saw Graham was a tall vulture of a man with droopy eyes and a bright red beard slowly growing white at the tips. A slick, bald head rose before her, with several sunspots as Graham pulled out spectacles to examine the small bottles Rick had procured him. Looks good. Silver means nothing when I got nowhere to stock up my inventory without making a manifest destiny. Please come in and have a seat." Graham snatched the bottles from Rick as Rick stepped aside and let Marfay step in first. There were shelves with bottles stashed away in them everywhere, countless books piled in every corner. with one wrinkled and worn leather chair sitting in the center. It looked to have the ability to recline 180 degrees fully. Graham gestured for Marfay to take a seat as he rummaged through his cabinet, pulling out some bottles. Then, spinning around, he looked at Marfay square in the face. "Well there, missy, you look a little banged up. Where are you in the most pain?" "Right here, sir," Marfay pointed to her left bandaged eye. "Before I take a look, are you sure there's nothing else hurts? Anything else you feel I should take a look at?" "Well, I've been pretty banged up the past few months. If you looked at my back and stomach for a moment." Marfay lifted her shirt and showed Graham her spine, and his eyes trailed upon her whiplash scars that painted throughout her back. Graham looked at the bruises and cuts scattered around her body. Taking some yellow ointment, he rubbed a finger's worth upon the wounds. "You heal up very nicely, miss. The ointment I gave you should help speed up the healing and ensure no further infection. I'm sorry about your unfortunate upbringing, and your back tells more stories than I'm sure you'd care to preach." "No need to apologize, Mr. Graham. Some of us hold stories of kindness and beauty, while the rest of us get the unwanted bits." Rick stood in the corner examining all of Graham's inventory as he reached out, trying to smuggle a bottle for himself. Graham glanced over and smacked Rick's hand, making him drop the bottle. "See here, young fellow, you best be keeping your eyes off such temptations, or the devil be riding you into the grave." "Save me the sob story, old man." Rick wiggled his hand as he returned his gaze to Marfay. "All right there, miss. Shall I take a look at your eye now?" "Yes, if you please." She began to remove the bandage. "Now, how long have you retained this injury, miss?" "A little over a month, give or take. I apologize, I've lost track of time these past few weeks. Unfortunately, I cannot recall in what condition it may be in." Marfay removed the bandage, revealing a deflated left eye. It was all yellow with patches of white, and it looked pussy and painful to the touch. Red lines drawn from underneath looked to be spreading. Graham turned to Rick, who kept his face away. He couldn't bear to look as he coughed and gagged a bit. "Now this will cost a little more. Gonna need surgery to help remove this infection that has plagued Marfay for God knows how long." "All right, here, give me a moment, you old vulture." Rick checked all of his pockets for something when a smile wrapped around his face. "Here you go. Will this cover the price?" Tossing something to Graham, the old vulture caught it in the air. Glancing at his palm, a smile spread on Graham's sunken cheeks. "Now, my dear, this is going to be unpleasant and very painful. I need you to drink this to numb your pain and bite down on this." Graham handed Marfay a wooden spoon. She took it, holding it as she watched Graham pull out a bottle of clear liquid. Uncorking it, he gave her the bottle. Taking a whiff, she coughed. "What is this?" "It removed a boil from the ankle of the mayor of 72. Marfay looked at him with one eye as he pulled out a scalpel, some scissors, and a roll of bandages. She took a deep breath, taking a swig of the clear liquid. She coughed and gagged as she set the bottle down. Then, popping the wooden spoon into her mouth horizontally, she bit down. Rick looked at her and then back at Graham, wincing in empathetic pain. "I'm going to step outside while you two—" Without finishing his sentence, Rick took off through the door and waited outside. "All right, now lie back, my dear. This will all be over. Well, just try not to think about it." After nearly an hour of pain and blood, Marfay laid down in the leather armchair in a puddle of her own sweat as Graham bandaged her eye. Marfay still held the bottle of alcohol as she spat out the remains of the wooden spoon. "Now give the eye a day or so, and it should start to heal. The infection wasn't too deep. You're lucky. Now, since your friend paid such a price, I'm going to offer you a little something extra." Graham turned around with a plate full of glass eyes, all different colors but very authentic and believable to pass as natural eyes. "When your eye heals in the next 24 hours, you'll want your lids to grip something to keep your eye muscles working. These glass eyes will be a great asset to you. Pick whichever one you like." "How about that one?" Marfay pointed to a glass eye at the end of the tray. "Oh, I'm sorry, dear. I need to finish the paint job on that one. However, I can finish it this week and ensure you receive it this following Monday. That is, if you're still residing in Mundosa." "No, it's perfect. I'll take it. Thank you, Graham, for all your help. I feel better already." "You look good," Rick said, stumbling through the door. "She all set, Graham?" "I'd like to see her again in a week if that's fine by you. But for now, she'll live." "You got a strong friend here." "I can't begin to tell you." "Ready to go?" Figured we could stop by the gunsmith to help you restock. Sounds good. Thank you again, Graham. Marfay extended her hand and clasped it with Graham's, who looked upon her and smiled. They walked out as Marfay looked at her new glass eye. Why did you choose that one? It doesn't even look finished. Rick stared at the glass eye in her palm. It was painted white, but the iris looked to be viridian green. The pupil was silver chrome, which made up the inner core, giving her a silver gaze upon anyone who dares to look upon her. I like it because it makes me feel like me. Unfinished. Well, it suits you. Hungry? Yes, I could eat. Let's get you some bullets at the gunsmith, and we'll grab something to eat. Rick and Marfay went to the gunsmith and purchased a belt of bullets which she wore around her shoulder. While buying a second revolver, upon its handle, it had the emblem of a raven. Afterward, Rick and Marfay strode down to the Prickly Peach. The saloon was packed, loud and violent, just as she liked it. Marfay removed her bandage and popped her new glass eye in as they grabbed a table. Didn't Graham just tell you to wait a few days before you put that in? It feels better now, plus I like it. And I want to wear it. Marfay, are you still a little tipsy from the operation? No. Maybe. I don't know who you are, my husband? Ms. Waitress. Yes, I'll take a bourbon and she will have a water. Come on, I don't want water. It's my first drink of Mundosa. I want something, Mundosa-y. Technically, you already had your first drink and it knocked you on your keister. Do you want me to pay you back for everything today? Thank you again. You paid for more than I asked for. It's not a problem. On the house. What was it that you gave Graham that swayed him to operate on me? Rick leaned in and whispered to Marfay with a shit-eating grin on his face. Intuition. Leaning back, the waitress returned with Rick's bourbon and Marfay's water. Rick took a sip as Marfay played with her water. Drink it, please. We've got other things to do today. What things? Marfay played with her water as she started to tap her glass eye, weirdly enjoying the feeling. Rick placed his fingers on her hand and slowly held her hand down on the table. Please, stop that. It's very odd. Now listen to me. I know you've been through a lot. Lost a husband, lost an eye, nearly lost your life a few times. I'm only here for a few days, but I feel compelled to help you. Why are you here, Rick? That's not important. Now drink that up, and we're gonna go. We just got here. Where are we going? Suddenly, a bell started chiming, and everyone started yelling and yipping as they got up and moved towards the exit. Some of the gunslingers fired their pistols in jubilation. Hey now, no firing in my saloon. You hear me? I catch you firing, and you ain't come back. Peach, the saloon owner, yelled from behind the bar, eyeballing every gunslinger as they poignantly holstered their guns. To your first boxing match. I'm not sure if you saw many from where you're from. I'm from New Orleans, Marfay said, drinking her water. I thought I could detect a twang in your accent. Rick finished drinking his bourbon, then reaching into his pocket, he pulled out a silver coin and slapped it on the table. Come on now. If you want good seats, we gotta get our rears shaking. Marfay finished her water and followed Rick and the crowd out of the Prickly Peach. They crossed the town square, passing the Hangman's Noose, and moving to the left of the courthouse, down Cherry Oak Alley. Then they took a right to Sandusky Boxing Ring. Most of the seats were full. They sat upon splintery bleachers as the crowd began to applaud for the contenders to come out. Rick and Marfay sat on the back side of the bleachers, facing the southeast corner of the ring. Marfay couldn't help but look to her right upon the large canyon wall that surrounded Mundosa. A path led up and over the wall, and she could see horses and travelers using it. That sidewinder tears, the only path in and out of Mundosa, besides the way we came. I learned that recently. It's their route for postage, trade, supplies, everything. Why did they call it Sidewinder Tears? Well, Sidewinder is a snake, and I believe many people died when they erected that path. So that's my theory. That's the only other way out of Mundosa? I saw another way northwest down Main Street, through the canyon. No one likes to chat about it. Guess we'll eventually find out why. Hey, look, they're coming! Marfay pointed at the alleyway near Elmhurst, where a group of women emerged with two contenders following behind. The women wore clothes in a fashion Marfay hadn't seen before. They weren't just white, but they were black, Quechan. Some even seemed what Marfay only knew as Oriental. Mundosa was indeed home to everyone who desired to get away. Behind the crowd of women were two champions. One of them was a mighty mountain of a man. His skin was dark, and his balding head gleamed in the sunlight. One of his eyes peered at all of them, a milky white, with black powder stuck in his right cheek and eyelid. Many say years ago someone tried to shoot him in the eye. Fortunately, The flintlock broke, and it backfired, sending burning black powder into his face. Next to him was a smaller man. From Marfay's understanding, he looked Asian. The size wasn't this man's strongest aesthetic, and he was skinny yet muscular. A long mane of hair flowed behind his head, tied into a braided tail. A tattoo of a cat mixed with a scorpion resided on his left jugular. Large bandages wrapped around his knuckles as he looked upon his opponent with several silver teeth. A tall, skinny black man with a booming voice came forward with their arms in the air. Gray curls covered their chin and hair. "My people, welcome to the first match of the season." Applause rang in the air as the announcer stood in the middle of the ring. The man's vocals bounced off the canyon's walls. A smile curled from ear to ear as he brought his arms down, silencing the crowd. "Now I have for you today 2 opponents that you'll be speaking about until the end of time. In the right ring, we have a mountain of a man. He comes from the hot plains of Georgia, born a slave and now free. Standing in at 6'8" and 325 pounds, the 9th wonder of the world, Aesop the Destroyer." A bell rang as the crowd cheered. Aesop came out with his fists in the air, smiling and roaring to the public while flexing his massive arms. Everyone cheered. Marfay looked around at the crowd and saw an elderly white man in a button-up suit. A spectacle rested on his left eye, and a gray beard covered his rosy cheeks. This man was surrounded by others in suits, along with a few women cataloging every minute of the event. "Who's that over there? I believe that fella in the nice suit is the mayor. Goes by Zandu Bickerton. Been mayor here for the past 10 years. I believe he was with us at the Prickly Peach not too long ago. Odd name for a white fella. He came to this town an orphan. His adopted mother is Quechin and his father was an ex-slave. So Bickerton grew up in this town and knew it better than anyone else." Standing in the opposite corner is an opponent not like any you've seen before. Traveling from the mountains of Laofu, China, claims to be the undefeatable in all of the East. He has faced 5 opponents in America and has defeated every single one. The indomitable, the vociferous, the pernicious white tiger, standing in at 5'8" and 170 pounds, Zhang Chi Fang, the slayer of demons. Zhang stepped forward and flexed his toned arms as the crowd went wild. The announcer brought his both opponents together and had them bump their heavily bandaged fists as they stared each other down. "I want a clean fight. When I blow my whistle, you back off. Understand?" Both opponents nodded their heads to the announcer. Then, picking up his whistle, he gave it a blow and raised his hands. "Let's have a good clean fight. Boxers, please move to your corners." Both opponents moved to their corners and began to stretch their arms. Marfay winced a little as the alcohol started to wear off and the pain ignited in her eye. Rick looked down at her and asked if she was okay during the crowd's roar. Straining his voice, Marfay couldn't hear Rick due to the applause. She looked up to him and nodded her head as the match began. The bell rang and the announcer stepped aside as the fighters charged each other. Aesop swung with a right hook to Zhang's face. Sliding on his heels, Zhang swiveled under the massive fist and hooked his knuckles into Aesop's stomach. The impact only startled Aesop. He swiveled and lost his balance. Zhang curved his heel and used an uppercut kick to Aesop's shoulder. Growling in pain, Aesop snatched Zhang's foot and threw him to the other side of the ring. The crowd gasped as Marfay giggled. "Now this is my kind of show." Marfay smiled from ear to ear. "Oh, the fun is just beginning," Rick smiled. Zhang jumped back onto his feet like a cat as Aesop sprinted towards him. Fists at the ready. Throwing every punch he could, Aesop attacked, moving forward. Ears perked and eyes keen, Zhang dodged and dipped through every punch. Not one swing hit him. This continued on until Aesop grew tired. Swing after swing, miss after miss, his heart grew tired, his breath came out in rapid gasps. Sweat began to drip from his head as Zhang mixed up his footing, and Aesop's giant fist nailed him in the chest. Flying back to the corner of the ring, Zhang gasped for breath as Aesop smiled, taking a moment to catch his own breath. Bending his knee, he rested as he looked down at Zhang's motionless body. The crowd cheered as someone screamed, "Aesop, you won!" Aesop turned his face to the crowd, trying to find the man who praised him. Zhang leaped back onto his feet and struck Aesop hard in his left cheek. The mountain of muscle stood up and held his head. As his eyes vibrated white, his teeth chattered. Aesop lifted his fist to retaliate, but suddenly everything went black, and his 300-pound ass fell backward. The ring shook like an earthquake as the ropes vibrated. The announcer ran over to Aesop, grabbing Zhang's hand, lifting it high in the air. 1, 2, 3. Zhang Zhifeng is victorious! The crowd went wild as everyone left their seat and flooded the ring. Aesop and his people helped him out of the ring, and he had a little trouble walking. Zhang had a mighty bruise in his right breast. It hurt like hell, but he couldn't help but brag that the destroyer himself gave him his new badge of honor. Marfay and Rick descended the bleachers with everyone else as they saw Zhang and a crowd of fans walking back to Cherry Oak Street to hit the saloons. Marfay walked with Rick, curling a smile on her face as her mind raced. The pain in her eye faded, although she still had irritation. That's it? It happened so fast, and I want to see more. This place is addicting, isn't it? You slept like a rock yesterday, and I couldn't stop exploring. I wanted to wake you so many times. What do you want to do now? I feel ready for anything. Let's have another drink to wash this over. Sun's beginning to set. I'm sure they have some great entertainment this evening. Where did you want to go? The Yellow Buckhorn, Fire Blossom, Diamondback Casino? We could gamble a little. Let's go back to the Prickly Peach. I'd like it there. Plus, we were only there for a few minutes. Sounds good. How's that eye treating you, Marv? It's irritating, but okay. Marv? Sorry, just wanted to try a sobriquet, if you don't mind. No, it's okay. My husband Nathaniel used to call me Mars. Astronomy was a hobby of his. He could name all the stars in the sky and tell their stories. Mars, I like that. How do you feel about everything that happened before today? I know this has been a sweet cocktail to help you forget, but it's okay to talk about it if you like. I feel okay. I think I'm still processing everything. I want to just keep having fun. No problem. I know we only just met, but I'd like to help you as much as I can while I'm here. I appreciate that, Rick. You're a good man. Glad you stumbled upon my camp in the middle of the desert. They shared a cordial glance and smiled as they walked onto Cherry Oak Alley, passing the Quechan Tentons. Some of them peered out from behind their backyard fences, tending their gardens and feeding their pigs. They were deeply tanned, with high cheekbones, and their long, dark hair was braided. Marfay whispered to Rick as they strode by, toward the courthouse. You mentioned that name, Quechan, earlier. Is that them? Yes, they are the indigenous Americans who resided in these parts before the advent of Mundosa. From what I've heard, they've been kicking around for a while. Several people fear going into those swamps. Why do they fear it? It's apparently where the Quechans come from, and is where many of them still live. They fear something known as a rounder. What is that? I don't know, but everyone whispers about it around here. These people fear the Quechan. Some of the saloons don't allow them in. Something happened a few years back. Marfay and Rick passed the hangman's noose and walked through the swinging doors of the Prickly Peach. Although the place was thriving with people, Marfay and Rick struggled to stand. Ah, shit. Well, it looks like we arrived too late. Rick apologized as someone bumped into him. Do you want to go somewhere else? This is fine. Look, there's an open table. Where the gentleman wearing the black hat is sitting. I don't think he'd mind if we joined him. Rick and Marfay maneuvered over to the grizzled gentleman wearing a black hat, drinking by himself. Walking up to the stranger, he caught their eye and lowered his bottle, slowly looking up at them. Excuse me, sir, may we join you? Marfay asked, hoping her glass eye was looking in the right direction. It would be my pleasure. Please, sit. Can I offer you anything? 2 bourbons, Rick said, looking at Marfay. She nodded in agreement. The stranger in the black hat raised his hand to the waitress as he gave her their request. She ran off to fill it out as he turned his head back to Marfay and Rick. I am Tobias Lodoff. How long have you been in Mundosa? We're both spring chickens, and we're only on day 2. Loving every moment. Rick smiled as the waitress stopped by and delivered their drinks. Rick and Marfay took their bourbon and lifted them to Tobias, smiling. A toast to making new friends in low places. Marfay smiled as Tobias and Rick repeated, To new friends. They each took a swig from their glasses and slammed them on the tabletop. Rick was the first to bubble up with rosy cheeks in a curious speech. Ludoff. By that name, in that slight accent, I can detect in your gavotte of a drawl that you are German? Very good. You have an astute intellect with accents, my friend. I'm sorry, I'm Rick Northwood. This here's my friend Marfay. Rick and Marfay both shook Tobias's hand.
Pleasure to meet both of you. Did you see the match today? Yes, we did. Fantastic, wasn't it? Marfay giggled as she took another sip of her bourbon. I lost some silver to Asa. Champion has been in Mundosa for nearly 2 weeks. Sounds like he was a bit too comfortable. Easy to get soft with a roof over your head. Rick sipped his bourbon as he turned his head to see Zhang, sitting at the bar. What brings you to Mundosa? Marfay smiled. I was tracking down my sister, who traveled west in honor of a rather famous scientist she admired. Do you think she came to Mundosa? Rick asked as Tobias sipped his bourbon. A slight intuition intrigues my suspicion. I've been here 2 weeks. No sign of them yet. They go by Harper. The last conversation we had, I can't stop running in my head. Was she upset? Did you guys argue? Marfay asked as she saw Aesop enter the bar. Ducking in through the doorway, he stood up straight, peering at everyone as his head nearly bumped the ceiling. Something about how she had to go because she didn't belong here. I wish I could have talked her out of it. We never actually talked. She left me this letter. Tobias pulled a letter from his coat and set it on the table. Rick snatched it and started skimming. How do you know she came to America? Marfay asked, glancing at the letter Rick was holding. Wish I could read German, Rick said, setting the letter down before Marfay snatched it up. She didn't say anything about America, but she mentioned her American Idol. And I heard a rumor he's in Mundosa. So I found my way here. Zhang! Aesop's roar interrupted them as he stumbled toward his recent foe, sitting with his fans at the bar. The entire place went silent as everyone lowered their drinks and stared. Tobias lost his train of thought as he turned his shoulders and looked to the bar. Aesop, how's your head?
You owe me.
Aesop pulled out a revolver, chagrined beyond belief. That's not exactly fair. Zhang raised his hand to gesture to his people to stand down. Instead, they lowered their weapons as Zhang brought his hand over his right hip, shaking his fingers over his revolver.
I have never been beaten. Never!
Aesop pulled the hammer back on his revolver and aimed right between Zhang's eyes. Well, today, you... Zhang stopped mid-sentence as the veins in his forehead intensely pulsed. Quickly, his face became bright red. Aesop looked perplexed, lowering his pistol. Zhang coughed up blood and fell face first before Aesop. Holstering his pistol, Aesop stepped backward, unsure what to do as he looked at everyone, shrugging his shoulders. What the hell is happening? Earlier y'all nearly shot my place up, and now there's a dead man in my saloon. Someone talk! Peach held up a shotgun to Aesop, who raised his arms.
Miss Peach, I did nothing. I swear. I was going to do something. I planned to take it outside, like you always say.
Sweat built up on Aesop's forehead. Aesop didn't shoot him. Nothing happened, an old lady mumbled, coming forward. Zhang just fell. Another person chimed in. Well, is he dead? Pete said, lowering her rifle. A Mexican gunslinger came forward and shifted Zhang onto his back. Blood covered his mouth and chin. Lifting his shirt, the mustached Mexican could see the bruise Aesop had given him, and his chest had turned an ugly purple color. My guess, he got kicked in the chest by a horse, and his heart stopped. No, that's where Aesop punched him, making Aesop a champion. A stranger said from the back as everyone stood still in silence. A young girl walked up to Aesop and grabbed his fist, raising it as high as she could. Aesop looked down at her, intrigued, yet unaware of what she was trying to do. Aesop is the undefeated champion! The young lady screamed as the entire bar grew in an uproar. People flooded to Aesop as they threw drinks in his face and warm compliments. Peach ordered that Zhang and his followers take him to Graham down the street. Everyone returned to their prior conversations as Marfay, Tobias, and Rick continued their discussion. Well, that was interesting, Rick said, finishing up his bourbon. It looks like I won my bet after all, Tobias said, laughing up a storm as a few friends slapped some silver in front of him. They were paying off their bets. Tobias collected the payment and deposited it into his inner coat pocket. Well, I hope you find your sister, Marfay said, handing Tobias back his letter. Then, while finishing off his drink, Tobias slid the letter back into his coat. I believe that's it for me tonight. How long will you two be in town? I'm only here for a few days, Rick said, finishing his drink. I might be here a little longer, still trying to figure out what exactly to do with my life. Always a great pleasure to start over. Tobias reached into his coat and pulled out a silver dollar for the table. A stranger strolled in from behind Tobias, placing a hand on his shoulder. They gave a gentle squeeze. Tobias, how is your evening? A young Korean woman said, wearing overall jeans, with her heavily muscled Korean lover standing behind her. Nari. Tobias grew tense as his right hand drifted toward his revolver. I'm not looking for any trouble. I'm just heading home. Rick and Marfay glanced at each other as their hands drifted to their revolvers. We aren't here to cause trouble to you or your friends. Just hand it over as we agreed, and you and your friends will have a pleasant evening. Nari's lover stepped forward and unsheathed his knife, stabbing it into the table. The knife had a skull welded into the blade near the hilt. Marfay and Rick stared at the blade as they saw Tobias's eyes stare it down like a lost lover. Did she give this to you, or did you take it? She left it behind, and we know where she is. Tobias's eyes widened as he unholstered his revolver and pulled back the hammer. Why don't we step outside for a moment? Grabbing a hold of the knife, Tobias pulled it out of the wood and sheathed it into his belt. Then, standing up, Tobias led the way out the door as Nari and her lover followed. You wouldn't happen to know about the turquoise, would you? Rick asked Marfay as Tobias left. No, what is the turquoise? It hit some of the papers in western Texas, and they say it comes from the Silvertooth mines. They found a rock the color of turquoise. It isn't worth much, but it has other uses. What other uses? Like black powder or dynamite? Worse, they say it gives you special abilities and feelings while it destroys you from the inside. They call it a narcotic, and I believe these past few weeks they've been selling it for profit. Is that why you're here, Rick? Ask me again sometime. It's not safe to talk about it here. For now, let's follow Tobias and see if the turquoise is what he's holding for Nari. Impressive. You read my mind. Rick pulled out a silver dollar and slapped it on the table as he and Marfay strolled out of the prickly peach. The night was upon them, and the moonlight gleamed upon their eyes. Coyotes howled in the night as bats flew above. They walked up to the hangman's noose and tried to see where Tobias had gone. Several people were strolling in the lantern-lit streets. A young lady played the violin as another sang a lovely tune. Prominent men grumbled and bickered in the shadows, trading tools, booze, drugs, tobacco. Cigarettes and cigars glowed in the dark, illuminating furrowed brows and curious eyes. Then they heard it, on Copperhead Street. They heard Tobias's voice. Rick took off toward Copperhead as Marfay followed. Pulling out his revolver, he rounded the corner next to the red roof meeting hall. Before they could see anything, a gunshot rang in the night as people gasped at the sound. Rick and Marfay turned onto Copperhead to see Tobias holding his revolver. It was smoking in the moonlight. Nari and her lover were gunned down. Lights in the Mexican and Quechan tents turned on as they opened their doors and windows to see what was happening. Tobias stood over the two bodies and saw Marfay and Rick stepping into the moonlight towards them. He wiped a tear from his eye as he holstered his revolver. Then, pulling out the knife Nari had given him, he showed it to Rick and Marfay with quivering lips. This belonged to my sister, and they said she left it behind. I said I wouldn't give it to them unless they told me where she was. They wouldn't tell me, so I was quicker to the draw. Tobias, what was it you were supposed to give them? Was it the turquoise? The sounds of shouting rang in the air as soldiers marched in the streets. They called the garrison. I've got to go. Tobias, just tell me. Rick strained his voice and tried to whisper. Was it the turquoise? They're coming, and if we're here, they'll lock us up. Marfay prepared to run. Why do you care what it was? Tobias sheathed the knife and prepared to make a run for it. It's why I'm here, Rick said, trying to calm himself. Blood was boiling in his veins as Rick was prepared to throw Tobias on the ground. If you're after the turquoise, they'll hunt you down and flay you in the street. The Greys catch me talking about it, and I'll be in the yellow bark before you can blink. I only did this for my sister. Advidesen. Tobias took off down Black Oak, running past Mexican and Quechan families who looked at him perplexed as they scrambled back inside their houses. Rick took off after him as Marfay didn't know what to do. Halt! Stop! A voice rang from behind Marfay as she saw several silhouettes appear from Main Street. The next thing she saw was a club coming down on her head. Marfay scrambled to grab her pistol after she stumbled headfirst into the dirt. Her other hand held her throbbing noggin. A pair of thick hands wrangled her wrists up, and irons clamped down on her. Dirt sprayed in her face as heavy boots stomped around in the dark. Throw her into the brig. We'll have the sheriff take a look at her tomorrow. Then drag those bodies to Graham's, leave them outside, write a note that we need those bullets extracted from them. Marfay was picked up and dragged from Copperhead to the Nabor River, crossing the wooden bridge to the stone pocket. It was a prison carved into the canyon. The windows looked like tiny pores pouring light from within the rock. The Greys escorted Marfay in. They uncuffed her and threw her into the cell with only one other person. She slammed into the floor with a cloud of nebulous dust around her. Marfay's head pounded like a drum as she blacked out.
Chapter 3. The Stone Pocket. Marfay smelled the damp cell as the sun shining through the cell window toasted her cheek. A pulsing erupted in her head as Marfay quickly discovered an enormous welt. Reaching downward for her revolvers, she quickly realized they were both gone. Cursing under her breath, Marfay wiped her face and sat up.
Hi there. Wasn't sure if you were dead or alive. You thought I was dead? Sometimes they throw people in here and they die in the night. Not the first time it happened. Sorry if I scared you. I smelled better than I did when I came into town. I'm Marfay. My question name is Blue Cheek, but people around here call me Skylar.
Focusing her eyes, Marfay sat on a second cot. Looking around the room into the shadowy corner, she saw a petite Quechan girl. She had long, dark hair that looked like silk. It hung straight from her head like a waterfall. Big brown eyes looked out from underneath as big lips smiled back at her. Dark tanned skin covered her body from head to toe, giving her some freckles on her nose. She was dirty and with some scratches and bruises. Skylar gave the impression she had occupied the cell for more than just a day. On her left cheek was a Quechan tattoo, blue spirals that looked like whirlpools. It made sense for her name. The tattoo looked to be covering up a small red birthmark. It looked like a bruise. At least Marfay thought it was a birthmark.
It's nice to meet you, Skylar. How is it you ended up in here? There was a man I was trying to kill. You know the old sing-song. You know, man, you keep them around long enough and they keep yapping about their money, land, and power. I can't help but squeeze a bullet or two at them. Except for my Nathaniel. He was something special. Nathaniel, your lover?
Nathaniel is my husband. Was my husband. Fortunately, he didn't survive the journey.
I'm sorry. He sounds like a tough fella.
Nathaniel was the toughest man I knew, but the things you love the most spend the shortest amount of time with you. How long have you been here?
Lost track after day 9. They've been a bit of a blur. I've been filing the bars with a piece of shell I managed to get off the last dead body they dropped in. Fortunately, it takes longer than I hoped.
Marfay looked at the middle bars in her window. There were 4. One of them was half full.
I'm surprised the guards haven't noticed. They're dumber than you'd expect. Strong like bulls, but dumb. When you get out, what will you do? See my friends for a bit, get a drink, hunt down the bastard I meant to kill. I'm sure I can help. Have you tried tricking the guards? I tried once, but it didn't work. Have you escaped a prison before?
I've escaped 2, but that was in New Orleans. Hey! Marfay and Skylar froze in place as they looked around their cell. Someone was talking to them. They darted their eyes to the cell door. No one was there. Marfay couldn't help but look under her cot, along with Skylar's. No one was there. Then they darted their eyes to the window. Again, there was nothing. But then something. A shadow suddenly covered the window for a brief moment as a head appeared and then vanished. Hey, out here! 2 suntanned calloused hands wrapped around the cell window bars as Rick's head appeared from the other side. Marfay, are you in there? Marfay jumped to her feet and ran to the window.
I'm here, Rick. What happened last night?
It's a long story, but I found out Tobias was making a deal with the turquoise. Fortunately, I lost him in the alleyway. Sorry you ended up in here. Are you okay?
My head is throbbing, but I'm okay. By the way, this is Skylar.
Oh. Rick strained his head to look at the other side of the cell. Nice to meet you, Skylar. Are you the reason this bar to the right is in half?
I am,
Skylar said, perking up with a smile. Nice work. Okay, I think I can get you 2 out of there.
Last night, they said the sheriff was going to check on me this morning. They said they were going to take the bullets out of the bodies they found and compare them to my revolvers.
What are you trying to say? Rick said as sweat beat down his forehead.
I'm saying if I leave and the sheriff shows up in the next hour, they'll be searching the town for me.
Ah, shit, good point. Should I come back later?
Hang on, I hear someone,
Skylar said, perking her ear to the door.
Just get down for a second, and I'll holler when it's all clear.
Okay. Rick let go of the window bars and dropped out of sight. 2 guards stumbled down the hall as they stopped before Marfay and Skylar's cell. Both were heavy-set, bearded men, with gray uniforms from the Civil War and badges with bobcats welded on them.
Sheriff wants to meet you, Marzay. It's Marquet,
the other guard said, correcting him.
Marfay, my name is Marfay.
Oh, sorry. We all thought the paper said Marty at first.
Hello there, Marfay, the sheriff said, peering into the cell.
I just wanted to confirm with you that the bullets we took out of the bodies last night did not match the size ratio of the chambers in your revolvers.
So you're free to go.
Stroking his long gray beard, the sheriff smiled until he saw the welt on Marfay's head. Also wearing an old Civil War veteran uniform, he had a bobcat medal pinned to his lapel that read Sheriff. A small gun on him and broad shoulders swayed upon his thick boots as he twirled his graying mustache. A large white cowboy hat sat on his head, with an even larger sheriff medal strapped to its center.
Oh, my dear, did one of my officers strike you last night? Yes, but I don't recall a lot from last night.
I'm sorry. I'll have Graham take a look at that.
Do you remember the officers from last night? I don't. Sorry. It was very dark.
I'll look into this matter, my dear.
I promise I have a slight intuition as to who it might be. Sheriff, where did you want us to lock up these questions?
Another suited gray officer said, with 3 questioned men chained up behind him. The sheriff turned to him just before he took out his keys to unlock Marfay and Skylar's cell door. Then, holding the key in the air near the bars, he turned and addressed this officer.
There's an open cell at the end. We just got rid of the 2 that were in there. These fellas rounders?
Yep.
One of them's a confirmed rounder. The other 2 have been working with other rounders for money, we suspect.
What's a rounder? Marfay whispered to Skylar.
Christian people who tend to sacrifice others to cleanse their spirits for when they enter the afterlife.
How long has this been going on?
Several decades. Mundosa don't like Quechan people much, so most of us aren't allowed in the saloons and shops.
All right, take 'em down the hall and we'll get the paperwork going.
After I finish my business rectifying some of the wrongs that have been proliferating around here.
The sheriff stepped aside, allowing the officer and 3 Quechan men to pass. The other officer stepped forward as the Quechan strolled by. One of the Quechan men clandestinely yanked the sheriff's revolver out of his holster. The Quechan pulled the hammer back and shot the sheriff square in the chest, along with the guards. Fumbling for their pistols, they shot back while trying to take cover. It was a bloodbath. Marfay and Skylar stood up and put their backs against the far side of the wall. The guards were on their asses. One of the Quechans was gunned down. The sheriff sprawled out on the floor. Crimson blood painted his white hat. One Quechan fell over dead as the other 2 took the keys out of the sheriff's thick palms and unlocked their chains. They went to the cell door and opened the padlock as they started speaking Quechan to Skylar. She uttered Quechan back as the 2 young men took off. Gunshots rang as the 2 Quechan boys took cover.
"These goddamn Quechans killed the sheriff!
Fucking rounders!" A voice shouted as shots echoed in the damp caves. Hands wrapped around the bars of the windows again as Rick's face reappeared. "Hey, what the hell's happening?"
"Everything's gone to shit,"
Marfay yelled as she and Skylar covered their ears from the bombastic sounds of the gunshots. One of the Quechan boys from behind them ran out of bullets as the other covered him. Blood splattered from his shoulder as he fell backward. The one behind him pulled out a knife as one of the guards charged with his bayonet drawn. "I got your revolvers. Slip them right through the window. I'm going to shoot the rest of the bar off. Do you 2 think you can slip through?"
"We can try,"
Skylar said, standing next to Marfay as they witnessed the guard spear the Quechan. Screams echoed behind them as blood sprayed against the wall of their cell. "Stand back!" Rick let go of the bars, dropping out of sight. Regardless of any hesitation, Rick shot 4 bullets into the middle bar and blew it the rest to pieces. Skylar looked down to Marfay and gestured upwards.
"You go first. I can go through fine. I measured it a while back."
"What if I don't fit?"
"You'll fit. I'll make sure of it."
"Okay." Marfay pulled herself up and popped her head through. She saw Rick down below, looking up at her. "Do you think you can fit through?" Rick said, wiping the sweat from his forehead.
"I don't know, but I'm gonna try. I think Skylar can push me from the other side."
"Okay. I'll help pull you down.
Pop your arms out. Rick raised his arms, waiting to pull Marfay down towards him when she stopped and suddenly saw Nathaniel instead of Rick. Come on now, honey. Honey, now we don't have much time. We've got a reservation at this fancy restaurant in town. You're going to light up the room when you show up in the nice dress I bought you. Nathaniel looked up at her, shining his ivory smile as he opened his arms up, ready to catch her. Hey, Marfay, come on. What's with the diddle-daddle? Let's go, Rick shouted, breaking her trance. Sorry, hang on, Marfay said as she popped her shoulders through the window. Then, pushing herself forward, she started to smile. She was pushing through with ease. Then she stopped. Her bum was stuck. What happened? You were slipping through so well. I'm sorry, my bum is stuck. Your bum? Yes, Rick, my bum. I'm sorry New Orleans ladies have large posteriors. I'm sorry, I promised I didn't notice. Ask Skylar to help push you through. Grab my hands. I'll pull you down. Skylar, can you push me a little? I'm almost through. I can, Skylar shouted as she leaped up, trying to reach Marfay. Struggling due to her petite frame, she leaped as high as she could. Quetcha men laid behind her in a pool of blood. A mad dog of a guard stood up with a bullet in his shoulder. Blood covered his powdered black beard as the seams in his antiquated silver war uniform began to tear. White, unblinking eyes of seething adrenaline glared onto Skylar. Bloody fists wrapped around the Quechan knife as the gray entered the cell. Alarm bells rang as the garrison was released. Suited gray soldiers marched down to Black Oak, making their way to Main Street. Is she pushing? Marfay, we have to go. They're coming. I can't tell. Pull me down. Rick gripped Marfay's hands and was yanking her down as hard as he could, but unfortunately her posterior was posing maximum resistance against the cell window. You best not be trying to escape, the blood-stained guard said, approaching Skylar with the Quechan knife. Those who escape the old stone in the pocket get the hangman's noose. Our sheriff is gushing cold blood. Your trial will be a quick one. I'm not escaping. You're just scaring me, Skylar said as she leaped up into the air, giving Marfay a swift yet powerful punch to her bum. A yelp came from Marfay's mouth as Skylar's blow shot her through the window, sending her tumbling on top of Rick on the other side. What the hell was that? The guard said, shifting around. You didn't see that? I heard something. My right eye went bad when some black powder went into it during the war. My left eye is the only good one when things are very close. Now, I'm not going to repeat myself. The hell was that sound? So help me, I will drag you into the hangman's noose myself. Skylar took a small breath, looking up at the brute as he fumbled about, swinging his arms in the air. Crouching down, she quietly lifted a small piece of concrete that had fallen from the wall. Holding it tight in her hand, she stood back up and looked at the guard straight in the eye. Drool dipped from his lips as the alarm stopped ringing. She could hear Grays marching in the dirt. Minutes away, gripping the piece of rubble, Skylar threw it into the corner of the room. The sound echoed behind the guard as he whipped his drooling face to the corner like a madhound. Next, Skylar picked up the remains of the metal pipe that were in the window. Gripping the pipe, she lifted her arm and smashed it against the guard's face. Blood burst from his cheek as he screamed. He was waving his knife in all directions. Falling onto his back, the guard struggled to stand as Skylar leaped into the air. Clawing onto the windowsill, she slipped right through the gap between the bars before the guard noticed. Where is she? Rick said as Marfay scrabbled off of him. Skylar flew out the window like a bird and fell right on top of Rick. Air burst through his lips as he gave a loud, painful moan. Dear Christ, what is it, raining women? Skylar, Rick, this is Skylar, Marfay said, smiling. Sorry about that, Skylar said, crawling off of him. I'll be fine. I can't feel my nether regions. Let's go. Rick got up as Skylar and Marfay followed. They ran toward the Nabor River just as the garrison turned off of Bluto. Freezing in place, Rick looked to the right and saw Red Asbury Farms. He smiled. This way, ladies. Over the fence. Rick sprinted to the Asbury Farms fence property line as the three of them hopped over, crouching on the other side, hid them all from sight. Cows mooed at their sudden presence. Shh, be quiet, big dumb animals. Stop it. One of the cows reached out with his tongue and grabbed Rick's hat as it slowly aided. Stop it. Stop it. I swear to God, of big dumb animals, I will send you to milk heaven. Give me my hat. Rick, be quiet. Leave the cow alone, Marfay whispered as she tugged on Rick. I'm not instigating, Rick said, yanking his hat back as the cow mooed at him. Moo yourself, you big milky bastard. They're marching over the bridge, Skylar whispered as Rick joined them. The three of them peered through the fence as 30 gray soldiers marched over the Nabora River and to the entrance of the stone pocket. Guards ran out and greeted them.
They explained the situation. Behind the garrison were a few fellows with notepads, scribbling away. Who are they, and what are they doing? Rick asked, figuring out who the 2 ladies and 3 gents scribbling behind the garrison were. The Daily Journal. This town only has so much news. They have to write about something. This will fill the papers for weeks. Skylar looked down the river. There sat a mansion. It looked over the town upon a small hill. Rick followed her gaze as his brow furrowed in perplexity. Whose mansion is that? Marfay was the first to ask, and she caught them staring for a minute. It's the mayor's house, Skylar sighed. I'm sure he's seen everything. Do you think he sees us? Rick asked, reaching for his revolver. No, I don't think so. We're too low. Plus, if he's looking out this way, he'll be looking at the brig. Spinning onto her finger, Skylar pointed up, in an attempt to feel which direction the wind was going. Ah, that's right. Sorry, I nearly forgot. Rick reached behind his back and pulled out 2 revolvers, both of them Marfay's. One of the revolvers was Nathaniel's, and the other was the engraved raven piece she recently purchased. As Rick handed them to Marfay, Skylar glared at the pistol with the raven crest on the hilt, staring as if the pistol was a long-lost enemy she didn't expect to return. I gave them the slip and managed to get you back your firepower. Rick smiled as he rolled back over and peered through the fence. Thank you. Have yet to use them. Marfay holstered both of them and scratched her glass eye, trying to push it into the right position so it didn't seem so lazy. Skylar began to sweat as she wiped her brow with a shaking hand. Puckering her lips, she asked a question she regretted. Where did you get the pistol with the raven crest? Rick bought it for me at the gunsmith, Marfay replied quickly, seeing Skylar's pale complexion. Did they tell you the last person who owned that pistol? No, they didn't. Did you know the previous owner? No, I was just curious if you did. Skylar's mendacious retort brushed off Marfay's concern quickly. First, she dabbed her head with a piece of cloth she tore from her clothes. Then, calming her breath, she gave one last glance at the pistol and looked away, frightened, as if a ghost had spooked her. The garrison is inside. Now is probably our best chance for getting out of here. So let's make for the Red Star. We'll get you 2 cleaned up and figure out what to do next. And I could use a drink. Rick stood up first, pulling out of his pocket a strange object. 4 metal rings stacked on top of each other, splayed out on his open palm. When you spread them apart, they formed a sphere. The air pushed the rings around and around as Rick held it up to the wind. They spun at different speeds, manifesting a hovering sphere before them. Cursing, he clenched the object and thrust it back into his pocket. What was that thing you had there? Marfay asked, standing up next to him. Just a little device I use to monitor the weather. Are you expecting something? We're in the desert. I can't imagine a thunderstorm will be rolling in anytime soon. You'd be surprised what the unexpected can bring. Rick hopped over the fence as Marfay and Skylar followed. They ran toward the North Nabora Bridge, followed the alleyway between Franklin and McCall Church and the sheriff's office. Then, taking a hard right, they ran straight through the swinging doors of the Red Star. They kicked the door open. Rick stepped aside as Skylar and Marfay ran in from behind. Shutting the door, Rick locked it as he took a big gasp. Rick threw his hat to his bed. Marfay laid on her bed, sprawled out in exhaustion. Rick strode over to her, looking at her face closely. How's your eye, dear? Feels okay. It's my head that's hurting. Sorry, darling, those officers pegged you. Look at my finger and try to follow it with your eye. Rick giggled a bit, realizing he was only focusing on one eye. Waving his finger back and forth, Marfay followed, and he saw her eye movements were fluid. You seem to be okay. Any memory loss, headaches? Have you thrown up in the past few hours? Nope, just a mild headache. I blacked out last night, but I feel okay now. Good. Let me just dab this on your welt. Rick pulled out a small bottle of liquid and dabbed it on a piece of cloth, slowly rubbing it on Marfay's welt as she winced in pain. Where did you get that stuff? Graham, Rick said as he noticed Skylar was scrounging through his bag of silver. Hey, get your grubby hands out of there. Skylar huffed and plopped on his bed, dropping the sack of silver. Then why did you take me the Graham? You look like you know what you're doing when it comes to medicine. Not a big fan of scraping away infection, plus surgery is not my forte. There, that should help with the swelling. Why don't you take a nap, dear? I'll wake you in an hour or so. Rick knelt and kissed her forehead. You're the strangest white man I've ever met. You have no idea. Rick got up and walked over to Skylar.
Not for you, Missy. Skylar dropped Rick's satchel and stood like a pugnacious cat. I let you stay with us because I trust Marfay's judgment, but you stink. How long have you been in the stone pocket?
I think no more than a week. I lost track of the days after 7.
Take a bath and sleep if you like. Then I might go out and take care of some errands.
Do you have anything to eat? I'm starving.
She looked around with her large brown eyes ready to snatch the nearest piece of food. I've got something. Rick ran over to his bag and tossed a few things to her she readily caught. It was a small loaf of bread and a square of cheese.
This cheese still good?
Bought it yesterday. Should be fine.
Well, thank you.
Skylar leaped up and hugged Rick. Then, catching him off guard, he let out a big gasp.
You're welcome.
Now, Rick slowly peeled her off as he picked her up and set her down a little ways in front of him, patting her on the head as if she were a small child. He smiled. I'll be back in a few, but please, please take a bath. Just yank the chain next to the tub and the water should come right out.
Okay. Thank you.
I'm going to lock the door. I'll knock 3 times when I come back, so you know it's me. Rick heard Marfay snort away as Skylar smiled and turned away. Rick checked his holster and walked out the door. Slowly shutting it, he saw Skylar take a bite of bread and cheese. Slowly setting them aside, fastidiously, she removed her clothing quicker than Rick could blink. Before he shut the door, Rick saw Skylar's long braided hair and plump quenching booty jiggling towards the bathtub. Closing the door, he stood up straight and burst out laughing. What the hell did I just get myself into? Rick smiled, running down the steps. After bathing for half an hour, Skylar found a spare robe in Rick's dresser. Throwing it on, she walked up to Marfay, who was snoring the afternoon away. Then, looking at Rick's bed, she strolled over to it and collapsed on the covers. A smile wrapped around her face. It had been a long time since she had lain in a bed that didn't consist of used burlap sacks and hay. Quickly, she closed her eyes and fell asleep as she and Marfay dozed away into seldom dreams. Skylar and Marfay woke up to someone knocking on the door 3 times. They opened and shut it quietly. Jingling keys rang in their ears as Rick locked the door behind them. Collapsing in his writing chair, he popped the cork off a bottle and started drinking. Marfay and Skylar stirred awake. Opening their swollen eyes, they looked at Rick. Coal dust covered the man from head to toe. His skin was nearly obsidian black. Marfay sat at the edge of the bed as Skylar moved to the edge of Rick's bed. The two of them sat and stared at Rick as he drank nearly half the bottle of enigmatic liquid. Then, settling the bottle down, he gasped and looked back at them, wiping another handful of coal dust from his face. Stop staring at me, you pack of coyotes.
How long did we sleep?
Marfay said, rubbing her eyes. Nearly 2 hours. Rick walked up to the bathtub and pulled the chain as water flowed from a pipe above. Then, taking off his clothes, he threw them to the ground.
Where have you been?
Skylar asked, trying to look away. I ran into our old friend Tobias. He showed me where in the Silvertooth they'd been mining turquoise.
What is with you and this turquoise? Why is it so damn important?
Marfay asked as she turned her face away from Rick. He was stripping down to nothing, plopping into the tub. They heard Rick sigh with relief as he began to washing himself. Marfay and Skylar looked back to Rick as they laid down on their beds with their feet up in the air. They were staring at him, as if he were some cute puppy playing with a bone. The turquoise is the reason I'm here, Rick replied, washing his arm.
Are you making a deal with it, or are you trying to use it or sell it?
Skylar asked while pulling out a comb, brushing her hair. I'm here to destroy it.
Why? I see people buzzing on the rock here and there on the streets. I don't see anyone doing any harm with it.
Skylar set her comb down as she began to braid her hair. Where I'm from, it's destroying everything.
Where are you from, Rick?
Marfay asked while changing her clothes. A long ways from here. Rick finished bathing, then reached over and snatched a nearby towel. Then, quickly drying off, as he stepped out of the tub, he wrapped the towel around his waist.
Did you mention to Tobias that he should be thanking me since I took the fall for him?
Marfay said with an indignant tone. Wrapping her belt around her waist, she holstered Nathaniel's gun and reached for the Ravencrest revolver. She couldn't find it. Then she saw Skylar sitting on Rick's bed, holding it. Tobias had a change of heart. Rick started to pull his clothes back on as he beat the coal dust out of them.
Was it the Koreans he had a change of heart for?
Marfay walked over to Skylar, sitting next to her as she stared at the raven-crested revolver. No, those Koreans were going to kill him regardless. They planned to take his stash after they shot him. This afternoon, he said he found his sister.
Oh, really? Marfay perked up. Where was she? The West Hazel Springs? The Prickly Peach? The Fire Blossom?
She never left Germany. But, fortunately, when she told Tobias she was leaving, she didn't mean Germany.
What did she mean?
She meant life. Rick finished putting on his clothes and strapped his holster to his belt.
Oh. How did Tobias find out?
Someone in his family figured out he was here and sent him a telegram. He found out this morning.
That's awful. Skylar, do you want to use my pistol? You seem to like it.
Marfay put her arm around Skylar, suddenly realizing she was trembling. Honey, are you okay?
Skylar, you seem fixated with the pistol. Rick brushed some coal dust off his hat as he threw it back on his head.
I'm sorry, it's just...
Skylar wiped a tear from her eye as she looked up at both of them.
I know the previous owner of this pistol.
Honey, what is the fellow you said you were trying to kill?
A gunshot blasted in the streets below as everyone screamed. Then the crowds became eerily silent. Then, finally, a voice rose above all others.
Who is that? Rick asked, running to the window.
It's the mayor,
Skylar said, evincing her fear for the tyrant man. The three of them ran to the window as they nearly forgot Skylar's sudden tears. Staring down at Pluto below, the street was packed. You couldn't see the dirt. There were so many people on the road. My beloved townsfolk of Mundosa, it has come to your mayor's attention the harsh truth. Our sheriff has been killed, along with many of our fellow guards at the Stone Pocket. We have 2 convicts among you. One was acquitted due to evidence showing she did not commit a crime. I am here asking you to bring forth these 2 women that were both locked within cell 345 on Block B. Marfay Lavisa and Skylar Bluecheek. These women will be tried in court for the murder of our beloved sheriff. If they are innocent, they will be exonerated and free to go. We will be conducting a mandatory search of every crevice in Mundosa. Please do not be alarmed. Thank you for your time. Please continue enjoying yourselves. Only 12 hours until lockdown. The crowd scattered as Marfay and Skylar whipped their heads to Rick.
Lockdown? Why is there a lockdown?
Marfay asked while poking Rick in the chest. That I didn't know. Skylar, why is there a lockdown in 12 hours?
Mundosa has a lockdown once every 67 days.
What's the reason? Marfay asked while looking out the window. Is there a big sandstorm coming or something?
No, I'm surprised no one told you.
Should we be alarmed? Every soldier in town is looking for the 2 of you. I only have a few days left here. We really don't have time for a lockdown, Rick said, while pacing back and forth, twirling his revolvers. Despite the situation, the 3 of us should go out tonight, just in case someone breaks down the door looking for you 2.
Well, it's important you know why everyone stays inside once every 67 days. The 2 of you pushed your luck showing up in Mundosa during Lavender Moon. Once every 67 days, the bunnymen migrate from the Yellowbark Forest to the desert. Then 67 days later, they migrate from the desert to the Yellowbark Forest. We leave the gates open for 1 day just for them. Those who venture out and try to greet them, we never really see again.
Well, that sounds like fun, Rick said, throwing some clothes at Marfay and Skylar. This place just keeps getting better and better. So put those on, with the handkerchiefs. We're going out while we can. I have to buy some dynamite while the sun's up.
Dynamite?
Marfay said, struggling with her hat. Don't worry, I'm not killing anyone, but if this lockdown is happening tomorrow, I need to buy the dynamite tonight so that I can pull this job off before I leave.
Okay, what should we do?
Skylar asked, tying her handkerchief. See if you can find Tobias again. Ask who else was involved with the turquoise. I need a better idea of what I'm getting into before I set off a powder keg.
Okay, Marfay said as she tied her handkerchief around her face. Should we leave separately?
Good idea. I only have 1 key to the room. So meet me at the Fire Blossom next door. I shan't be long. It'll be a good place for you 2 to stay low. Take some silver from my sack, get a meal, take the room key just in case. I'll be back. Rick didn't even say goodbye. Instead, he threw them the key and just left, shutting the door behind him.
Rick is the strangest white man I've ever met, Skylar said, fixing her hat. Yeah, that's why I love about him, Marfay replied. Besides, that butt on him, right? What? Marfay whipped her head to Skylar. You've got to be more subtle, dear. I saw you staring. These past few days feel like some fever dream I can't wake. I barely know what I'm doing. Let's go.
Skylar fixed her handkerchief and her hat, completely concealing her identity as she looked at Marfay with her big brown eyes. Marfay was equally just as covered. She looked back at Skylar with her large hazel eyes.
Better to try and find Tobias in daylight. Have you met him? I have no idea what this fellow looks like. He's German. Tall fella with a grizzle and a big black hat. Probably only German in town. Where did you meet him? In the Prickly Peach. Well, we'll look there last. Then after that, I figured we'd go ahead and take a look at every saloon in town. I don't know much about Germans, but I hope they stick out of the crowd. Why are you helping us? I mean Rick mostly. Why are you helping Rick? After my husband died, I was all alone. He saved my life and brought me here. I owe him for that. You saved my life, and so did he. I prefer to pay off my debt before I get killed. Are you expecting to get killed? Once you learn the proud owner of that pistol there, you're expecting death as well. Marfay raised her eyebrow as Skylar strode past her towards the door. Then, looking down, she looked at her revolver and stared at the raven that sardonically cawed at her. Let's go, Marfay. No time to waste. Yes, sorry. They both took some silver, locking the door behind them. They leaped down the stairs. They came to the front lobby and burst through the front doors. Stepping onto Blue Toe, they could see the sun was an hour before setting. Two men were in the street dueling. As Marfay and Skylar rolled their eyes, keeping close to the building walls, they went to the Fire Blossom as they heard the sound of the duel behind them. I'm here to call you out, fat man from the west yelped. I'm called out. What are your terms? The tall, slender man said, dipping his blue hat. What is with men constantly plucking at their mortality? Marfay rolled her eyes at Skylar as they entered the Fire Blossom. All the walls were bright crimson red as erotic women served everyone seated. A lady sang a tune on stage as a suited fella played a tune on the piano. Marfay and Skylar approached the hostess. Excuse me, but is there a German man here? Marfay asked as she looked around, talking through her handkerchief. Couldn't tell ya, the plump woman said with ink and quill. Never met a German. Did anyone come in by the name of Tobias Lodoff? Don't think so. Give me a moment. I can look in the sign-in sheet here. Skylar and Marfay waited uncomfortably for a moment as the plump lady looked through. Nope, no Tobias. Sorry. Thank you for your time. Marfay and Skylar turned back to the street. How the hell are we supposed to find this German of whom we know nothing about? Skylar mumbled, agitated. How did Rick find him earlier today? I think he was implying he was lucky. So let's keep looking. Do you agree to my terms? The fat dueler gasped. I agree. Do you want to count? Yes. We'll start at 1. A gunshot rang as the tall fellow drew his pistol with impeccable speed and shot the fat man right through his left eye. Skinny chicken shit bastard. The fat man spat as blood fell from his face. Everyone watching on the street applauded as the fat man fell backward. That was the best duel I saw in 3 weeks. Skylar giggled to herself. The duel lasted nearly 2 hours, or just spitting and cursing. Despite looking around the Fire Blossom, they couldn't find Rick either. The two of them moved down Blue Toe and turned left on Copperhead. Taking a right, they entered through the swinging doors of the Yellow Buckhorn. The walls were full of buckheads mounted on plaques, along with wolf heads, coyote heads, snake heads, every creature that has ever lived in the canyon. There were more men in the Yellow Buckhorn. Armed men, scary men, arm wrestling, throwing darts, throwing axes at the wall. Everyone looked to be competing against one another. The two of them walked over to the bartender as Skylar waved him down. A skinny black fellow who had a friendly smile greeted them. Excuse me. I'm sorry, you question? No offense, miss, but we've had enough trouble with rounders around here. No questions allowed. Turning away, Marfay stepped up and grabbed his attention. Please forgive my sister. She's from the plains of Texas and never met her mother or father. She means you no harm, to you or your establishment. I mean no offense, miss. Just following protocol. Now, what can I pour the two of you? We're not looking for drinks. We're looking for a German fella who goes by Tobias Lodoff. Have you served him today? I have. About 2 hours ago. I don't think the German is here anymore. Arm wrestled a fella and lost. I believe he's a bit of a sore loser. We're looking for him. Trying to honor a transaction we made with him recently. Would you happen to know where he's gone? I believe he's a gambling man. Stop by next door to Diamondback. Thank you very much. Henry. You can call me Henry. Thank you. Henry.
Marfay gave a smile as she and Skylar left the Yellow Buckhorn and moved next door to Diamondback.
What was that? Skylar laughed. Sorry, I don't think you know. I have a glass eye, and it gets a little lazy sometimes. I think Henry was staring at it. It's a tender topic for me. No, you were smitten by him. I heard you sigh. Skylar laughed. Boy, you are such a delight to have around, constantly commenting on every single interaction I have. Your interactions are fascinating. So I thought it was best to let you know every time you have one. I think you might be stranger than Rick.
The two of them entered Diamondback. They had to push aside red curtains as they walked through the door. The music hit them like an ocean wave as they stumbled forward. The air was full of smoke as there were tables scattered everywhere. The walls were bright green with a slight yellowing from the smoky air. Loud voices hit their ears as several different games took place. A stage was at the far side where the musicians played a tune. Marfay and Skylar looked around. There were so many laughing yet angry faces. Cards and money scattered on the floor as they scanned the room. "Excuse me, would you like a table?" a very dapper and skinny white gentleman asked, twirling their mustache as they readjusted their tie and vest.
Apologies, no. We're looking for an old friend, Skylar muffled under her handkerchief. Goes by Tobias. He's German, wears a black hat. The Yellow Buckhorn next door said he might have stopped by.
Marfay was growing anxious as the host looked around through their books. Oh, wait, here we go. Tobias Ludoff. Would that be your friend?
Yes, that's him. Is he here?
Skylar jumped a little in her boots. Sorry, he was, according to my clock, about 20 minutes ago. The host flipped a pocket watch out of their front lapel.
Any idea where he may have gone?
I'd check around the street. There could be a match going on. I noticed a good deal of people half an hour ago left, so may not be far behind.
Thank you very much for your time,
Marfay said as she and Skylar stepped outside.
Son of a bitch, this is frustrating,
Marfay spat out as she pulled down her handkerchief to breathe. Skylar pulled hers down as well. They absconded to the side alley out of view.
Where do you think we should go next? I mean, 20 minutes ago, he was here, so he can't be far behind.
Marfay started fidgeting with her glass eye as Skylar saw a glint of silver in her pupil.
Let's go down to Sandusky. Hopefully he's right, and there's a match right now. After that, let's check all the stores. We only have a few hours of sunlight left, but odds are he can't be far.
Shouting and loud voices of three men arguing echoed from behind them.
Let's get out of here. I'd rather not be in this mess.
Skylar turned her heel toward Main Street. Marfay stopped and yanked her arm back.
Hey, what the hell?
I see him. Marfay drew one of her pistols and moved forward.
What was that hobo lying in the alley?
Skylar pulled out the pistol she stole from the stone pocket guard. Marfay moved forward and slowly walked up to a man bleeding in the alley. He was rapidly breathing as he looked up to them with frightened eyes. Blood stained the stone and dirt as his shirt turned crimson from multiple knife wounds. Next to him was a black hat. Blonde hair stuck to his face as his hand shook.
Tobias?
Marfay said, kneeling in front of him, tearing away her handkerchief.
Marfay?
Tobias said as he coughed up blood. Holstering her pistol, she vetted him to see if he was hurt anywhere else.
Who did this to you, Tobias? We've been looking everywhere for you. Rick said he saw you only a few hours ago.
I'm finished. The turquoise runs deeper than I thought.
What do you mean, deeper?
I tried. Tobias coughed up, some blood catching his breath.
I tried to get out of business. I'm sure Rick told you about my sister. I wanted to get out and go back to Germany, to my family. It isn't every day you travel halfway across the world, searching for your sister only to discover she ended her life back home.
A few tears fell from Tobias's eyes as he looked back to the ladies.
So I wanted out. I wanted enough of their business. I wanted to wash my hands of it. Everyone is in on it. And they said I know too much of the buyers. They said this wasn't a business I could walk away from. Who are the buyers? Fuckers who stole my sister's knife. The last thing I had, that was hers. Tobias, listen to me. Who are the buyers? Who did this to you? They're all in on it. Rats, eating each other. Soon enough, there won't be anything left to eat. Nothing left but the rest of the world. Tobias, Tobias, Marfay yelled, holding his head as his blonde locks fell on his face as he died on the spot. The poor man had been stabbed 5 times in the chest.
Next to him was a sack. Picking it up from the ground, Skylar looked inside. Reaching in, she pulled out a small nugget of turquoise. It shined in the sun as Marfay looked at it. Best to keep this out of sight. Let's go to the Fire Blossom. The sun is setting. We'll get a table, and hopefully Rick will show up. The two of them threw their handkerchiefs back on and ran down the alleyway, taking one last look at Tobias, all splayed out in the dirt, bleeding like a stuck pig, blonde hair a mess as his blue eyes looked up to the sky. Crossing Bluto, they came to Fire Blossom. The light bouncing off the bright red walls blinded their eyes as they asked for a table. Cheerful music played as the band sang their hearts out on the far stage. The hostess sat them down as they kept their handkerchiefs and hats on. Ordering a few drinks and some food, they sat and ate clandestinely, hoping no one would recognize them. When the waitress stopped by to check on them, they handed a few pieces of silver from Rick's sack. After about 30 minutes of eating and drinking, the two of them found themselves a little inebriated. They loosened their handkerchiefs and took their hats off, disregarding Rick's caveats on how every soldier is searching for the two of them. Laughter filled their bellies as they couldn't help but exchange story after story. The two women became two little girls, laughing about how silly the world was as they chatted about their favorite things.
Okay, Skylar, so tell me, what is it with you and this pistol?
Marfay pulled the raven-crested revolver out and placed it on the tabletop after taking another swig of whiskey. Skylar's eyes grew big. They filled with tears as she wiped them away. Reaching over, she picked the revolver up and stared at it. Setting it back down, she slid it over to Marfay.
The devil that wielded this gun last killed everyone in my family, my tribe, my life. I used to live in the Quechin lands down the canyon through the Yellow Bark. The creature came in the night, filled with rage-seeking blood. Nearly all my people were killed by this one man, except for me. At the time, I couldn't speak English, but it felt like he let me go to tell others what he did, so they would know he was the Reaper who comes to collect souls to remain in our world. I left the Quechin lands. Although there are a few tribes that still live there, I went to find them. And I came to Mundosa. I learned English, and I got a job. I did everything I could, yet he didn't come. And I couldn't find him. According to your American calendar, it has been 3 years. 3 years since my tribe died. 3 years since I left my people. 3 years I've been living in this hellish place, all to confront the devil. I thought I saw him a few weeks ago. I took my opportunity and shot him in the back. But it wasn't him. I killed the wrong man. However, some of the guards were friendly. I told them of my reasons, and they told me they knew him. He goes by the name Butch Jenkins, but many call him Red-Eye Raven. The name came from his right eye, which is a little red from an accident he had as a child, and he always had a thing for ravens. The guard told me he'd left a while back, sold everything he owned, and willingly walked into the Yellow Bark. Something about it was time to face judgment, whatever that shit means. For all I know, I've wasted all these years here, changing my name, my hair, my clothes, the way I speak, all for my enemy to give himself up.
Marfay picked up the raven-crested pistol and slid it across the table to Skylar.
Keep it. Even if he's gone, it belongs to you. Don't be haunted by it. If there is a slight chance he's alive, it is your destiny to send him to Ghost Nation with the help of his hammer.
Skylar picked it up and smiled, wiping a tear from her eye. Then, unholstering the revolver she took from the guards, she slid it over to the table.
I'll trade your mine for yours. Smiling, she held Red-Eye's pistol and holstered it as Marfay's eyes tilted to the right. People always told me I was the sweet one, but once Marfay let her guard down, you could see she was oozing with honey. Nathaniel, stop it. You're embarrassing me. Your drink looks a little empty. Do you need another? I don't hear any stutters. I'm guessing you already had full.
Marfay started to laugh as she took another swig of her whiskey. You know me all too well, darling. I can't help it. Sometimes a few drinks are all I can do to wash away my rickets to tell you as eloquently as I can muster how beautiful you indeed are. Now, I'm off to see you when I see you. Try not to tell people apart with your words. You made a bloody mess last time, dear. Nathaniel leaned over and kissed Marfay on the head as she watched him leave through the front doors.
Marfay, who are you talking to?
Skylar looked over her shoulder, trying to see who Marfay saw.
I'm sorry, I think that's enough drinking for me tonight. Sometimes my husband pays me visits when I least expect it. I understand. Easy to let go of the living, yet difficult to keep the dead from visiting.
So how long have we been here? Rick should have been here by now, shouldn't he? Skylar tried to look for a clock as Marfay pulled out her pocket watch. It's late. We've been here for a while. Something's wrong. Well, it's where'd he go if he couldn't come? The two of them sat for a bit, thinking to themselves as the band finished their song. Just an announcement. No need to hurry. We will be locking down and closing our doors in 2 hours. So please enjoy the rest of your evening, and we'll see you after the lavender moon, the chubby lady from the front announced as she picked up her skirt and left the stage. The band whispered to each other as they switched to a different song. Shit, he's got nowhere to go. We're the ones with the room key, Marfay said, slapping the brass key on the table. He's only been here as long as you, right? Aye, Marfay said, snatching the room key and throwing it back into her pocket. We've got to figure this out. No way in hell we want to be on those streets after lockdown. Where could he be, unless he's running from the same people who slaughtered Tobias? Marfay looked at Skylar with wide eyes as she understood Rick's delay. If he's hurt, he's got to go to Graham's. Let's run over quickly. Odds are, if he was stabbed or shot, Graham should be sewing him up right now. Marfay slapped some silver on the table as they walked to the hostess, then putting their hats back on and wrapping their handkerchiefs over their faces, Marfay knocked on her podium. Excuse me, if you could give a message to our friend Rick, just in case he pop by, would you mind telling him to go to the Red Star? Marfay passed along a piece of silver to her. I will, the heavy-set lady replied as she watched Marfay and Skylar take off through the front door. Trudging down Bluetoe, they turned down the alley and passed the barber shop. Then taking a hard left down Scarlet Ave, they ran up to Dr. Graham's front porch. Pounding on the door, the doc didn't hesitate to swing open. The bloody hell do you two want? The bald man scratched his scalp as he threw on his spectacles. Marfay pulled down her handkerchief as she looked up at him. What brings you here, Marfay? Has Rick stopped by today? Did he ask you to sew him up by chance? Marfay noticed Graham had a rag and was washing some blood off his hands. You're very intuitive. Sounds like you know your partner. I just patched him up, what had to be 15 minutes ago. Took off for Fire Blossom, I believe. Did he tell you what happened? Skylar asked, pushing forward. Something about people following him. They cornered him and carved him up a bit. Rick was in a rush, so he didn't talk much. Thank you, Graham. See you after the lavender moon, Marfay shouted as she took off with Skylar jogging behind. Lighting a rolled cigarette, Graham took a toke as he blew smoke rings while laughing to himself. I told her to wait a few days before putting that glass eye in. Graham chuckled to himself through staggered breaths. I've got a bad feeling about her. Smells like trouble. Skylar and Marfay didn't even bother checking in at the Fire Blossom. Instead, they ran straight to the Red Star. The sun had set and the stars were sparkling. People had begun to hurry back to their homes. The streets were empty. All you could see were bright eyes and bright embers from cigarettes in the dark. The shine of silver revolvers glinted in the moonlight as Marfay looked at the sky for a brief moment. The stars twinkled as she could see the moon was changing color. The light had a strange glow. It was turning into a lavender haze. Bursting through the front doors of the Red Star, the two of them ran up the steps to the floor. Then, running down the hall, they came to their room. Splayed out in front of the door was Rick. They were smoking a cigarette, leaning on the door with his eyes half open. I've looked worse, Rick said with some bruises and stitches scattered across his face. There were several bloodstains in his clothes, followed by some torn bits of his shirt. Then, smiling within staggered breaths of smoke, he looked up at them with one black eye. You two look like you've been having fun. Marfay and Skylar unlocked the door and carried Rick inside. Sending them on the cot, he moaned as they took his boots off and helped him relax. Do you want anything to drink or eat? Skylar asked, rummaging through his dresser, trying to find something. There's a bottle of whiskey over there. That'll do. I managed to eat a bit while at Graham's. You'd be surprised how good of a cook he is. Skylar walked over and handed Rick the bottle as he pulled the cork out with his teeth, spitting it to the floor. Marfay locked the door as she took her hat, coat, and handkerchief off, laying down on her bed. Skylar did the same, but vetted Rick's face and body first, ensuring Graham did a decent job. All right, there. Hey, little lady. Rick grabbed Skylar's hands and pried them off his scalp. I'm fine. And Graham did a good job. I know that old bird better than you do. I visited a handful of times. Half the time I went home still bleeding. Skylar stopped examining Rick as she sat down next to Marfay. Tobias is dead, Marfay said, taking off her belt. Ah, shit. I'm guessing you didn't get much out of him. He said the buyers control the town. I think you might be going in over your head with putting an end to this turquoise drug ring. Marfay took off her vest and her boots as she glanced out the window. Skylar was doing the same. Stopping for a moment, she looked at Rick. Did you get the dynamite? Yep. Rick took a swig of whiskey and opened his jacket.
Right here in my coat pocket. Damn it, Rick! Skylar ran over and yanked the dynamite out of his jacket. Then running to the corner of the room, she placed the sticks in the dresser's bottom drawer. Give us a heads up next time you're carrying dynamite. Sorry, I've been having other things on my mind. It took me all afternoon to get that. Do you remember the people who did this to you? Marfay walked over to Rick and took the bottle from him. They were Grays. That's not good, Skylar said, taking the bottle from Marfay after she took a swig. Someone's ordering Mundosa soldiers to take out anyone who intervenes in the turquoise ring. This ring goes deeper than we thought. I thought this town was known for silver mines. This turquoise worth more than silver? Marfay asked, taking back the bottle from Skylar. Once you know its properties and uses, then yes. It's worth nearly 3 times the amount of any silver dollar. So what makes you think you can break the ring, Rick? Did you hear the others who died tried? I didn't know of the others. I'm sorry. There's something I have to do. It's why I'm here. Rick pulled out his weather rings from his pocket. Holding them up, they moved slowly. Cursing to himself, he threw them back in his pocket. What happens if you can't make this work, Rick? What happens if you fail? Marfay asked while staring out the window. I don't get to go home, Rick sighed as he winced in pain from his wounds. Where is home for you? Skylar asked, glancing outside with Marfay. Home is very far from here, Marfay answered as Rick threw her a wink. I feel like shit. It's late, and I'm hoping tomorrow will be a far better day. So you two can stay up if you like, but I'm going to take a much-needed snooze. So if you feel an earthquake tomorrow, don't be alarmed. It's just the bunnymen. Glancing out the window, they could see everyone going indoors, dousing the lamps, locking up all the windows and doors. The night was quiet and cold. Mundosa rocked itself to sleep by the lullaby of the howling gray wolf. Chapter 4, The Lavender Moon. Marfay woke up to the sound of a voice, and someone nearby was having a difficult conversation with someone else. Rubbing her eyes, she leaned over her bed and saw Rick was gone. Someone was talking right outside their door. It sounded like Rick. Looking at her bed, she noticed Skylar was gone. Then she glanced across the room, and she saw her sleeping in Rick's bed. Marfay remembered Skylar was asleep with her before they all knocked out for the night. She realized Skylar was testing her when she asked about Rick's ass. She was trying to embarrass her. She was trying to see if Marfay liked him, because Skylar did. Well, aren't you clever, Marfay said under her breath while looking at the snoozing pile of brunette hair that was Skylar. The hotel room door opened, and Rick stepped back in, shoving into his pocket his weather rings. Who were you chatting with? Just saw a passing fellow and asked him how everything was going. Rick walked in with a short-sleeved shirt and briefs as he started putting on some clothes. Any sign of the bunnymen? Nothing yet. I've been asking around the building. No one has seen the bunnymen. All the townsfolk believe they'll come in the next hour. I found a hatch to the roof. We'll get a great show and see the whole migration. I'm excited. Anywhere we can grab something to eat? I heard the hotel has a restaurant on the first floor. All the windows and doors are locked up and boarded up, so we can't go anywhere else. Well, if you want to wake up the pile of hair in your bed, let's all head down and eat something. We'll try to be quick so we don't miss the migration. To be frank, we went to bed and she was with you. I didn't realize she was in my bed till this morning. Rick walked up to Marfay and whispered to her, Do you know how old she is? I think she's in her 20s, but I don't know, so why do you ask? I'm just a 30-year-old guy, and where I'm from, it's weird for a child to be sleeping in bed with an older man. You're from a square place. Nothing seems weird to me about that. Sorry, I guess you could say I'm a little square. All right, I'll wake Blue Cheek. You should get ready yourself, sleepyhead. Rick turned to Skylar and leaned down, whispering in her ear. Hey there, princess. Time to wake up, or else you're going to miss the Bunnyman parade. Sorry, it's been such a long time since I've slept in a bed. As Skylar rose from the bed, she looked like a pile of hair growing taller. Then, pushing her hair aside, she began to braid it with swollen, sleepy eyes. Sorry, but do any of you have any clothes I can borrow? Unfortunately, now is not the best time to go back to my apartment. I have some you can borrow. Sorry if it's a little big on you. Marfay handed Skylar some clothes as she threw them on. Skylar asked for another belt to help keep the pants up. The three of them got ready and made their way down to the first floor. Should we put our handkerchiefs back on, Rick? Marfay asked, looking back through their room. No, all the soldiers are stationed in the garrison on the other side of town, so we should be safe for today. So we'll put those problems to bed until tomorrow. They made it down to the first floor. It was packed. Everyone in the hotel was currently eating. The windows all had sheets of metal drawn down on them. No sunlight came in. Only the light from gas lanterns lit the place.
They grabbed a seat and had a bite. Your face looks better, Marfay smiled as she ate a piece of toast.
You sound like my mother.
Graham did a bang-up job in the little time I gave him. I was afraid I was going to be locked out last night, so I left as soon as he finished. So what's the plan today? Watching the migration? Skylar stuffed some toast in her mouth. Then what? Well, there is a warrant for the arrest for both of you, but no one knows how the two of you look. So I was wondering if we could change that in our favor. Rick smiled as he took a swig of orange juice while pouring a bottle of clear liquid in his juice once Marfay and Skylar looked away. How do you suppose we can pull that off? Sending an anonymous letter to the courthouse? That's not a terrible idea. Do you think we could divert the conversation to another matter? I do. I believe the sheriff getting murdered wasn't an accident. It was a setup. They're trying to get you two to cover their tracks since you were the ones who witnessed the act. How would a letter grant us impunity? Skylar asked, finishing up her plate, pushing it aside while scavenging Rick's plate. If we bring up what we know and are willing to expose them to the public, the court may be willing to drop the case, along with the witch hunt. I like it, Marfay smiled. I'm assuming we would have to remain anonymous? Yes. We'd have to either not sign it or forge the signature of a political official. I like that. What makes you think the sheriff was a patsy? Finally, Skylar gave in and just took Rick's plate, finishing his food. Well, from what my hometown has learned about the turquoise, if you smoke it, you get high. If you drink it, you'll be more susceptible to brainwashing. So there is often an odor and some erratic behavior that occurs when the turquoise brainwashes someone. I believe those questions and the stone pocket emitted those symptoms. You spoke to them, Skylar, Marfay said as she finished her juice. What did they say? They weren't making any sense, but they were trying to help us. We can add that to our deposition, so now we have 3. Odor, erratic behavior, and your eyewitness account of speaking with them. We'll get it all in ink. We can make 2 copies, one for the courthouse, one for Bickerton. How will we get these letters to them? Skylar said, noticing people were starting to get up and move towards the stairs. Along with everyone else, we're stuck here. You don't know the tunnel system, Rick smiled, leaning back. I heard a rumor, Skylar scoffed. I didn't think they existed. Why does Mundosa have tunnels? Marfay interjected, eager to get up and join everyone up the stairs, but instead the room started to empty as the plates in the kitchen began to shake. Mundosa has tunnels, from what I read in the library, because at first they thought the Lavender Moon would last longer. They tried to create a society that could exist with the bunnymen stopping by more frequently. From my current research, they've been using the tunnel system to keep their turquoise drug ring underground. The table began to shake as the plates and cups jingled back and forth. Before we get this letter written, Skylar stood up and shoved her chair back under the table. Let's go and enjoy the Lavender Moon while we can. The 3 of them picked up their plates and set them aside for the dishwasher. Then, running up the steps, they climbed to the 4th floor, exhausted and sweaty. Rick opened the hatch to the ladder that led to the roof. Bright white sunlight blinded them as they stepped onto the flat rooftop. Rick helped Marfay and Skylar out of the hatch as he closed it behind them. A few others were standing with them, an artist painting a picture, a photographer, and a small group of young people taking in the show. They walked over to the side and looked to the streets below, glancing over the giant red star that hung on the hotel's mantel. The bell chimed from the bell tower of the northern wall. Slowly the smoke cleared and they saw it. True beauty, as if they all witnessed an iceberg migrate at top speed through the Arctic Ocean. The bunnymen scattered between Main Street and Bluto. You could see their migration come from the Yellow Bark, move through the gate, and split right at the corner of Yellow Buckhorn. They nearly knocked over the town windmill. They returned together down the alleyway by the barber shop and Main Street, making a straight escape down Elmhurst into the Mojave Desert. You could see them disappear into the sand, as if they never existed. Marfay had to squint to understand what they indeed were. The whole building was shaking from their migration. It was challenging to focus. As she squinted, she could see they were huge armadillo-looking creatures. Their heads were low, but their shoulders were very high. They each had to be nearly 11 feet tall by their shoulder height. Their heads hung around 6 feet in the air. They had heavily armored craniums with long snouts full of hidden yet very sharp teeth that poked out like a cobra.
yet recoiled when snapping shut. They had enormous, floppy, scaly ears like a beagle that hung on the sides of their head, and to enhance their hearing, they would raise them like a shepherd, flexing them in the air. You couldn't see, but they had a second set of insect mandibles inside their mouths that helped break down their prey. Long quills with sails waved back and forth on their backs, possibly to help control their body temperature. Their front arms folded within their shells. When extended, they were powerfully clawed arms of a praying mantis. They could hold down any prey and slowly break them apart with just their sheer strength and speed. Easily, their arms could immobilize their prey and subdue them. They had long armored tails with which they used to communicate. They would bang their tails on the ground in rhythmic beats. Their legs resembled those of kangaroos. They didn't step left and right. Their heavy paws moved 2 by 2. They hopped. That's why they shook the earth. They weighed nearly a ton each, and they leaped off the earth with their immense weight, landing 10 feet away. Marfay started laughing to herself.
Are they called bunny men because they hop?
Yep, Skylar laughed. Despite how scary they look, they come off kind of cute when they hop away.
A horse had gotten loose from Red Asbury's farm. It sprinted to Blue Toe and stopped, startled at the migration of the bunnymen. It stood, nervously panting. 3 bunnymen stopped hopping and turned to the horse. They approached quietly. It happened at such speed, their eyes couldn't comprehend what it was they witnessed. Their mantis arms lunged out at the horse, penning its body down. Their claws dug through it, tearing chunks of flesh. The horse screamed in pain as they dragged it towards their mouths and slowly ate it alive. Their mouths resembled the mandibles of a 70-year-old man with no teeth. Then, sharp needle teeth popped outward like fangs of a cobra. Their second set of mandibles followed behind. Within seconds, the horse had been torn apart as these 3 bunnymen devoured it. After 8 minutes, the horse was a hollow, steaming carcass, and the bunnymen were already rejoining the migration. Marfay and Rick turned away, covering their mouths as they both gagged. Skylar kept her steely gaze as she smirked at the both of them.
First time I saw a bunny man was when I was 5. You think this is bad? Imagine living amongst them in the northern valley of the canyon. They're everywhere, and they eat everything. My tribe could kill a few of them if need be. Their shells are as thick as my head. They are one of the reasons why people die when they wander into the yellow bark.
What are the other reasons people die? Rick asked as he glanced over to the yellow bark.
Not having any experience in that forest will get you killed within 20 minutes. It was harder to leave, to be honest.
Skylar rubbed her neck with her hand.
Took me a while to get used to your sleeping patterns and your beds. You Americans sleep for so long. Other horrors are crawling in the swamp that you don't want to know. There is a reason Quechan people can be scary at times. You have no idea what keeps them inside after dark.
Skylar rolled a cigarette and scraped a match she had against the stone roof, igniting it. Taking a long drag, she blew a smoke circle.
Sounds like you had a very charming life there, Skylar, Rick said, laughing a little to himself. Looks like the migration is complete.
Marfay pointed to the northwestern gate. You could see their numbers were dwindling.
They keep the lockdown going until 5 p.m. After that, the beasts don't move far into the desert. Sometimes they wander back in, and these gates can hold back a few, but not all of them.
Skylar put out her cigarette and blew another smoke ring into the air.
So we have until 5 to get these letters out? Marfay asked, looking at Rick and Skylar.
Should be enough time. Rick looked at his pocket watch. Right now, it's only 11:20. They returned below to get started. The 3 of them had been writing in their hotel room for nearly 4 hours. Rick finally started putting the final touches on both letters. Out of the 3 of them, he composed the best handwriting. Marfay and Skylar had been pacing behind him for the past few hours as they wrote the letters together. Done! Rick pulled up both letters, blowing on them softly to dry the ink. I didn't sign them. Should we sign them? I don't know any politicians or elected officials out here or what their signatures looked like.
Don't sign it, Skylar retorted. Don't want to give any ideas that we're behind this. Unsigned letters. I like it. Nothing scarier than not knowing who's talking to you.
Marfay smiled and walked over to the window. The 3 of them heard bells chiming. What is that? Rick asked, standing up, cracking his back.
The guard towers.
I think they're closing the gates, Skylar said while joining Marfay, glancing out the window. Should we use the tunnels? Rick asked as he folded up both letters and placed them into separate envelopes. Taking some hot wax he had been heating up, he filled a wax stamp. Pressing hard on the stamp, he sealed both envelopes shut. I don't think we need to. If we leave right now, when everyone is opening things back up, we can run and distribute the letters before anyone knows, Skylar said, turning around, looking at both of them. So who's going to distribute which letters? Rick looked at them ardently as everyone grew quiet. I'll do both, Skylar said, walking over to the letters. Glancing at the wax seal Rick used, they were skulls, making the red wax look like bleeding crimson heads. Where did you get the wax seal? I stole it, Rick brushed some dust off his shoulders. I figured it would be useful later on, and I stand corrected. Well, that stamp makes the letters look like some archaic gang leader wrote them. They might overreact to this, Marfay said, trying to express the caveat of their actions. It might be enough to scare them into dropping our names. Skylar made sure the wax was dry. Then taking both envelopes, she stuck them in her pocket. You know where to go? Marfay asked Skylar as she brushed some dust off her coat. I know this town better than the two of you, Skylar snickered to herself as she threw on her hat and tied a handkerchief around her face. I'm going to run to the mayor's mailbox at the edge of the Nabor River. Then I'll go to the courthouse, slip in, go to the judge's office in the back, and slap the letter on his desk. Go to the courthouse first, Rick said, straightening Skylar's hat. How about this? Give us the mayor's mailbox. Marfay and I will take care of that. You take care of the courthouse. Rick walked over and opened his hand to Skylar. She pulled out one envelope and slapped it in his palm. Marfay and I will meet you at the Prickly Peach. Once finished, let's catch a play at the O'Reilly Theater. Marfay and Skylar smiled at Rick as he smiled back. Okay, let's head down the stairs and get started. Marfay threw on her coat and handkerchief, popping her hat on as she messed with her glass eye. Stop rubbing it, Rick said as he pulled Marfay's hand down from her glass eye. We need to stop by Doc Graham and get some ointment. It's itchy as hell. The three of them walked out of the hotel. Walking down the steps, they saw everyone in the hotel was waiting on the first floor for the Grays to open the front doors. Patiently, they all stood as Grays came from outside the gates and unlocked them. Moving aside the metal shutters, Rick turned to Marfay and Skylar. Keep your heads down. Don't look anyone in the eye. We're going to be as quick as we can. If something goes wrong, we'll meet up at the Prickly Peach, no matter what. Skylar and Marfay both nodded their heads as the doors opened. People flooded back out onto the streets as the sun was beginning to hide behind the mountains. Two Grays stood near the doorway with silver cap badges and rifles on their shoulders, scanning every person who passed. Rick kept his head up as Marfay and Skylar hid behind him, keeping their heads down. They passed unnoticed. Once they stepped onto Bluto, Skylar took off down the alley as Rick and Marfay took a right. They ran down Bluto and took another right towards the mayor's mansion. Crossing the Nabor River, they came to his mailbox at the very end of the very long driveway. Quickly opening it, they shoved the white envelope in as Marfay glanced at the mansion. Through one of the windows, she could see someone staring at them. Shit! Marfay turned to Rick. Someone sees us! Keep your head down. Rick grabbed Marfay's hand as they took off. The stranger continued to stare as they ran back into town. They rounded the corner of the post office, taking a moment to hide in the shadow. Then, breathing heavy, they both smiled at each other. Well, that wasn't too difficult, Marfay gasped as she looked back around the corner. Two Grays stood where they just were and started marching toward them, rifles strapped around their shoulders. Shit, Grays are coming! Marfay began to sweat as she looked at Bluto. Rick snatched her hand and pulled her close. What are you doing? Marfay asked before Rick planted a deep kiss on her lips. The two held each other in the setting sun as the Grays rounded the corner. Hey there! What were you two doing? Oh! The Gray stopped in a sudden stupor as his companion punched him in the shoulder. Sorry for bothering to you, his partner said as he pulled him away. What the hell's wrong with you? You and that couple's kissing. No, I saw them. I saw them at the mayor's driveway. I think they put something in his mailbox. You shut your trap. No whiskey for you tonight. The two Grays left as Marfay and Rick continued kissing. After a while, Marfay stopped kissing Rick and took a step back, staring at him in the eyes. Sorry, Rick said, smiling. Thought it would be the best way to keep them off of us. Well, yeah, it worked. Marfay was a little flabbergasted, rubbing her neck. Rick held her hand and looked at her. Hey, let's go. We can chat about this later. Yeah, sure. Rick took off as Marfay looked back to the bridge crossing the Nabor River. Nathaniel was smoking a cigarette, gazing at her with a smile on his face. Marfay felt chagrined seeing him. She turned away quickly without looking back. She took off after Rick as Nathaniel blew rings of smoke in the air, chuckling to himself. The two of them ran towards Main Street and turned left, running down to the Prickly Peach. Unfortunately, it wasn't open. Most of the saloons on Main Street weren't open yet. Damn. Well, I guess we can meet her outside, Rick said as he turned his head in perplexity. Marfay also heard something odd. There was yelling and screaming behind the courthouse. Marfay looked at Rick as he looked from her back to the courthouse. I hope she didn't get caught. Let's run over and take a look. They both ran to the courthouse. They stopped against the southern-western wall. Quietly, they moved towards the edge of the building. Rick was the first to look. He gasped and looked back to Marfay. What is it? Marfay asked as Rick looked somewhat relieved. It isn't Skylar. She's safe. Just something much worse. This way! Down Cherry Oak! Hurry! It's tearing everything apart! A voice yelled as a platoon of Greys marched past Rick and Marfay. They couldn't see what was happening. The Greys cocked their rifles as they moved into firing positions. On my mark, get into the position. Aim, fire! A volley of rifle fire exploded in the air as horrific, monstrous screams followed. Rick and Marfay covered their ears. Two bunny men got loose, and they're eating some of the Quechin tenants. Rick shrugged his shoulders. Let's get out of here before things get worse. We can wait outside the courthouse. Hopefully she's nearly done. Watch out! A voice screamed as the ground shook. A shadow covered them. Thunderous panting and growling approached as a bunny man came leaping down Cherry Oak. Blood poured from its flesh as it gasped and grunted with every step. Let's go! Rick grabbed Marfay's hand and taken off down Cherry Oak towards Main Street. People walking on Main Street screamed and scattered in panic at the sight of the gored bunny man striding their way. Blood poured from its mouth as it gave a terrifying roar. Riflemen to the square on the double, a voice shouted as every corner of Main Street, gray suits appeared with rifles at the ready. The massive creature lumbered over to the hangman's noose. As it locked its knees and lifted its snout in the air, it gave a massive roar, releasing shrieks that bounced off the buildings and nearly burst every window and every eardrum. Blood poured from its mouth as Rick and Marfay hid in the alleyway next to the Prickly Peach. Across the street, they saw Skylar abscond from the front doors of the courthouse. She glanced over, seeing the horrific sight. Then she saw Rick and Marfay across the street in the alleyway. Rick met her eyes and waved his hand up, trying to tell her to stay. She stood still as the entire garrison appeared in the town square. Within every corner, there had to be 30 Greys with their rifles pointed. The bunny man looked all around, unaware of what to do. Finally, it huffed and charged a group of Greys in position next to West Hazel Springs. Fire at will! A voice yelled as the entire square filled with gunfire. Stop! There's a man on its back! Stop! The creature fell over, dead, as blood spurted from its mouth. The whites of his eyes shined as its tongue flopped around like a dead fish. The Greys approached the creature cautiously as they noticed a man was hanging onto the creature's back. Get this man to Graham, scout the area, confirm to me in the next hour that we caught the only two bunnymen in the area. The rest of you will work together to clean this up. The saloons will be having a special bunnymen tonight. Everyone cheered as they scattered to their respective duties. No need to be alarmed, people. The area is safe and secure, the captain of the guard announced, stroking their mustache as they shouldered their rifle and ordered the rest of the Greys. The streets filled with people as Marfay and Rick met with Skylar next to the carcass of the bunnymen. How did you do? Rick asked Skylar, looking around, making sure no one heard. Easier than you think. How did you guys turn out? We had a few Greys on our tail. Marfay looked at Rick and smirked. We managed to divert them. Excuse me, could you stand next to the bunnyman, please? A young photographer was setting up their stand as they framed out the shot while the three of them were talking. I just want to get a picture for the journal. Marfay and Skylar mumbled to themselves, wondering if it was a good idea. Then, without query, Rick pulled them both to his side, smiling at the photographer. Sure thing. Okay, hold still. The photographer went underneath the cloth that draped behind the camera. Rick stood there smiling as Marfay and Skylar pulled down their handkerchiefs and looked up at him. Rick, have you ever had your picture taken before? Skylar asked, laughing with Marfay. What? Rick said with a smile. Is there something wrong with the camera? Rick, it takes a full minute to take a picture. Marfay began to laugh to herself. Wait, what, a whole minute? And then they heard a loud click, and the photographer came back up from under the camera curtain. Thank you very much, the photographer smiled while approaching them. You'll see this in the paper very soon, and here's my address. The photographer handed them a card. If you'd like, The pitcher just contact me here. Marfay and Skylar couldn't stop laughing at Rick as he held the card. I messed up the pitcher, Rick sighed. I just know it. Well, should we celebrate a little? Skylar said, holding Rick's hand as Marfay averted her gaze in slight jealousy. Let's go to the theater. Marfay smiled as they saw Rick smile. Why not? I don't even know if they're going to have anything showing. The three of them walked away as Skylar glanced back to the Grays who were carrying the man clung to the back of the bunnyman. She couldn't get a good look at him, but something was familiar about them. The Grays carried him off to Graham's, and Skylar turned back to Rick and Marfay. Crossing the Nabor River, they came to the small cobblestone road that led to the O'Reilly Theater. Walking up to the front door, Rick looked inside. Rick jiggled the door handle. The locks kept it from budging. Damn, maybe we're here too soon. Rick tried opening the other door, but it wouldn't open. Well, should we go back to the Prickly Peach and get a drink? Marfay asked, stroking her shoulders. I can't go into the Prickly Peach, Skylar said shamefully. They don't let Quetchins drink there. Well, let's go to the Fire Blossom. I think they're fine with Quetchins. We'll eat and drink for a bit and ask around for when the next showing is. Sounds good to me, Skylar smiled. The three of them made their way back into town, sneaking past every Gray they saw. Fortuitously, they were all elsewhere, and only a few were patrolling the streets. The town smelled of blood. They averted their gaze away from the Grays, cleaning up the remains of the horse they witnessed earlier. Hopping into Fire Blossom, Rick asked when the theater would be having their next show. The hostess informed them they would be performing a comedy in 2 hours. The three of them smiled as the hostess sat them down. Taking in their fill, the three of them ate and drank until they felt like they would burst. About an hour and a half later, the three of them were not only full, but they were also drunk. They were laughing to themselves as they told one joke after another. Marfay and Skylar didn't even care if Grays came in and arrested them. Things had been so stressful. The three of them enjoyed one of the best nights they'd had in years. Rick was so quippy they couldn't keep up. Going ahead and ordering one last round of drinks, Rick looked at his pocket watch. We have a little over an hour until the show. Last round, ladies. What's this play again? Skylar asked while simultaneously burping. Oh, sorry, she giggled. It's a comedy, Marfay retorted. I think. I don't know. That's what the lady said at the counter thing over there. So tell me, Skylar, a girl of your age, 22, I'm assuming, what is your opinion of American society? I'm 26, actually. Skylar smirked as she sipped her bourbon. Rick looked at Marfay and gave her a wink as she held back laughter. Your society is strange. What is the point of constantly rewarding yourself with money? You never seem to do anything unless it involves money. When I first came here, someone had to tell me 3 times what a prostitute does. I lived in the library during my first year in Mundosa, of which the book selection isn't the best. Nevertheless, they managed to fill me in on some history. How does the Quetchin society function? Marfay asked curiously, trying not to sound condescending. Women carry out government functions. We are what you would refer to as a proxy for our tribes and people. We don't have money, and we work together. Everyone has a purpose, a function, a cog in a wheel. Life isn't about how much money you have to your name or how much land you govern. Life in a Quetchin society is about being one with the spirits and being one with your people. We're not individual people, as we are one great entity. How come so many Quetchins reside here? Apologies for those who died on Cherry Oak today, Rick said while emptying his cup, pushing it aside. From time to time, people from our tribes are banished from war crimes, treason. Some leave willingly because they feel your society is easier. What about the Rounders we've heard so much about? Marfay leaned back, hoping she didn't sour their conversation. Rounders are not Quetchins. They used to be, and they're monsters. Must be difficult walking around here when people think you're a Rounder, Rick said under his breath, staring at his empty glass. It can be, only if you let it get to you. Most people aren't afraid of you, just of what you can do. So I get by what I can. Everyone who's a Rounder was someone who was banished from the Quetchin tribes and forced to worship with the spirits in the banished lands. These are the banished lands? Marfay asked. Yes. I can never go back. Why did you leave? Rick asked while grabbing Marfay's glass and taking a swig. She punched him a few times in the shoulder while snatching her drink back. A devil killed my family. My parents, nearly my entire tribe. So I came here to find him if he's still alive. Your people often speak of a single God that has created everything in their image. Yet you long for them to return. I often wonder if your God is afraid of returning for fear of what they created.
Skylar stared at the table's wood as if it were a snake, slowly coiling its way towards her.
I'm sorry for your loss, Rick said, placing his hand on Skylar's. She looked up, surprised by his warm gesture. Sometimes all the bad in the world is put there to help us pay more attention to the good. Skylar smiled as she looked into Rick's eyes. She had a little trouble getting her words out.
Yeah, so how about that play? I think it might be time for us to go.
Oh, shit, Rick said, standing up as he pulled his hand away from Skylar. Then, looking at his pocket watch, he snatched his hat. Yep, we've got 10 minutes to get over there. Rick dropped some silver for the table as the three of them took off. Stepping outside, they stumbled and swayed, trying to get their footing as they made their way back to the O'Reilly Theater. The lanterns lit up the crowded streets. The smell of blood and bunnymen still lingered, but it was slowly fading as the city sweepers cleaned things up. Skylar and Marfay walked with their arms around Rick as the three of them stumbled down the street. A man started to follow. They couldn't make them out at first, but he didn't feel threatening. Excuse me, lads, might he be heading off towards the O'Reilly Theater? Yep, that's where we're heading. Would you like to join us? Rick smiled at the fella as they lit a rolled cigarette, the embers illuminating their eyes in the dark. It would be my honor. I'd be Roger Porter. Stepping out of the darkness with a giant cigarette in his metal-capped mouth was a black Caribbean pirate. They had dreadlocks that hung past his shoulders. A few swords and pistols hung from his belt. Dueling scars covered his cheeks. A coat full of black powder stains and bullet holes hung on his shoulders. Tattoos wrapped his arms and chest as he smiled at them, with smoke pouring out of his mouth. He was walking towards them with boots salted by the sea. Pleasure to meet you, Mr. Porter. Marfay tilted her head so she could see him with her other eye. What brings you to Mundosa? The seas have not been as fortuitous as one would hope. A mate of mine a few years back told me of Mundosa. So it's been a while since I ventured on land. A little vacation, if you will.
What hotel are you staying at? Skylar asked, glancing around Rick's midsection.
I'm at the West Hazel Springs. I had the best view of the whole show this morning. It was something, Rick laughed as they all turned towards the Nabor River, crossing the bridge. Did any of you see that fella who clung onto the back of that bunny man? I wonder how long the poor man had been there during the migration.
We saw Grace help him get to Graham's, Marfay said, trying to recall if she saw him or not.
He has a reputation. Goes by Butch Jenkins. So I asked around and people said he's been gone for nearly a year. Rick kept walking with the ladies, not truly understanding who Roger was talking about, although Marfay couldn't see Skylar since she was on the left side of Rick. She knew her blood was boiling. I didn't think that name would stir up so much noise until the mayor went to visit him. Roger moved ahead of them, reaching for the door, pulling it open. He gestured for them to walk in first. Après toi, mes amis. Roger smiled as he extinguished his cigarette. They stepped into the theater as the next 2 hours were a swirl of euphoric bliss. They laughed until their ribs were sore with bruises. The theater was packed and the stage was full of great performances by men and women. Dancing in multiple costumes, performing skits, special effects with large puppets of bunnymen, making fun of the governor, making fun of Mundosa. The irreverence for everything and any topic was up for grabs, making it all the funnier. Before their wishes, the talent and crew thanked them for coming as they all applauded during their bows. They were heading home, a little sober with more of a jump in their step, when they walked under beautiful twinkling stars back down the Nabor River Trail, making their way to the bridge. That was stupendous, Roger said. One of the finest performances I've seen in my years. My mates would have gained a few extra years if they were able to bear witness.
The stars are beautiful tonight, Marfay said, looking up.
Yeah, they are a sight to behold. It's a beautiful night. End to the lavender moon, Rick said, holding Marfay and Skylar tight. All three of them had their arms around each other as they walked. Skylar was still quiet, ever since Roger told them about Jenkins. She hadn't said a word. Skylar enjoyed the show, laughing the whole 2 hours. The Quetchin girl's mind was set on one thing and one thing only. Before the end of the week, she would find and kill Red-Eye Raven with his pistol. They reached Copperhead and prepared to turn left onto Pluto when Roger turned to them, smiling as he gave a short bow. Then, taking off his hat, he gave them a silver grin as he stood back up.
Thank you for joining me tonight. I hope to see the three of you again soon.
You will,
Skylar said, stepping forward and shaking his hand. Rick followed as Marfay wrapped her arm around him in a loving embrace. Awfully kind of you. I'd love to invite you onto my ship one day. See the ocean for all its glory if you tire of this wonderful place, that is. Till next time. Roger dipped his hat again and turned his heel. Heading down Copperhead Street, he turned on Main Street, disappearing into the shadows. The streets were full of theater patrons. Everyone finally stumbled back into their beds, sleeping under the Mundosa twilight. Rick, Marfay, and Skylar strolled down Blue Toe as they made their way to the Red Star. Well, ladies, Lavender Moon is almost done. Soon we'll have to wait another 67 days to enjoy another riveting day. Rick started laughing to himself as they made their way into the Red Star. Excuse me, Mr. Northwood. Rick turned to face the hotel host, standing behind the desk. Yes, that would be me. A letter for you, sir, from the mayor. Rick's brow moved up as he stood in perplexity to why the mayor would be writing to him. Then, reaching out, he accepted the letter as the three of them continued their way upstairs. Unlocking the door, they all stumbled in as Rick sat at his desk chair, opening the letter with a knife from his belt. Taking it out, he slowly read it as Marfay and Skylar waited for his response. Damn near waited 5 minutes. After he finished reading the letter, Rick put it aside and held his face in his hands. Staring off, Marfay walked over and snatched the letter as she quickly read it. What does it say? Skylar said, agitated. What the hell does that Bickerton cocksucker want with you? Bickerton wants me in his office 8 a.m. tomorrow. It doesn't say any specifics except that they want to inquire about my dynamite permit, since they have word that I have dynamite on me, against regulation. He's mainly inquiring about the letter he found in his mailbox this morning, says someone on the scene saw me. He wants to ask me a few questions behind closed doors. Shit! Does he think you wrote it? Marfay asked, tossing the letter aside. No, but he saw me this morning when we delivered it. I've got a bad feeling about this. I need to blow the turquoise shaft before I head over there tomorrow. You're going to his office? Marfay asked, not realizing she was shouting. Quiet. We don't need eavesdropping here. I have to go, or else I'm going to look suspicious. But, you know what? Fuck it. Rick got up and opened the dresser drawer where Skylar had stored the dynamite. I only have so much time left. I'm blowing it tonight. I'll be back. Without Marfay or Skylar getting a word in, he shut the door on them and was gone. Stopping down the staircase, he ran back out onto the street. He was snatching one of the gas lanterns that illuminated the road as he took off for Silvertooth. Marfay and Skylar argued most of the night about what to do, what they should do, what they can do. But in the end, all they could do was wait. Wait for him to come back. Hope to God everything was all right, copacetic, and went according to plan. Chapter 6. The Turquoise Ring. Marfay and Skylar woke up to a loud explosion over the mountainside. Jumping out of bed, Marfay saw Rick left behind his pocket watch. What time is it? Skylar asked, rubbing her eyes. It's almost 3 a.m., Marfay said, rubbing her eyes as she ran to the window. He did it! What should we do? We should do something. Shouldn't we? Skylar couldn't stop pacing back and forth. Her fists clenched. They both had fallen asleep in their clothes, waiting for Rick. The Greys will be all over him when we get out. Let's go. Maybe we can give him some cover. Skylar agreed as the two of them grabbed their revolvers and left. They sprinted down the stairs and kicked open the front doors of the Red Star. Stepping outside, it was palpable how silent and still Mundosa was. You couldn't even hear the wind. The stars illuminated the streets as they walked down Blue Toe. You could listen to their footsteps from a mile away. They saw lights glowing near Copperhead. People were waking up to the explosion. Odds were the garrison was up. The Greys were dressing and about to deploy. They stood right outside the post office by the windmill. The both of them could see the light come from the mines. Smoke billowed from the entrance. Is that him? Skylar pulled out Red Eye's revolver as Marfay pulled out both of hers. I can't tell, Marfay squinted. It's too dark. I can't tell. Wait. They both saw him. Saw Rick leap out of Silvertooth. He was rolling around on the ground, coughing a storm. Marfay holstered her revolvers and took off as soon as she regained her breath. Skylar hesitated for a moment as she heard voices start to rise in Copperhead. Then, cursing under her breath, Skylar took off after Marfay. The two of them ran past the windmill, over the bridge of the Dambora River, up the winding trail that led to the entrance of the Silvertooth. It took almost 10 minutes, but they managed to scramble up to Rick, struggling to breathe, while rolling around in the dirt. Inside the mine shaft, they could see some of the wood beams holding up the tunnel had caught fire. Standing above the town, they saw it sprawled out before them. Mundosa was slowly waking up. Lights began to flicker on, and voices began to carry in the air. Rick, are you all right? Marfay placed her hands on his face as she tried to look into his eyes. They're coming, Skylar shouted as she pulled out her revolvers. I don't know if we can go back to the Red Star. They're cutting us off on Copperhead. Breathe, Rick, breathe, Marfay was holding Rick as he coughed. There you go, slow, take it slow, Rick. I did it, Rick smiled as Marfay and Skylar, with coal dust covering his face. His hair stuck up in all directions as if electricity flowed through him. They'll come after me now. I finished the job, and now I can go home. Reaching into his pocket, he pulled out his weather rings and held them outstretched. The rings spun faster than they had spun before. A white light started to emerge from the rings as they glowed. Marfay and Skylar's mouths dropped as they couldn't look away. The light filled their eyes, giving them a strange feeling. Then a voice whispered out of the object. Rick's smile grew wider and wider. They couldn't hear what the small voice said, but Rick could, and suddenly the light went out, and Rick was putting his device back into his pocket. I'm going home. I can't believe it. I did it. I did it! Rick, Skylar shouted as they saw people slowly climbing up the hill. We gotta go. We gotta get out of here. Henry Wood, Marfay shouted as she helped Rick onto his feet. Who? Skylar mumbled, growing angry about a second. Henry Wood, the farmer out here. Let's hop the fence and we'll hide in his corn. The three of them stumbled in the dark towards Henry Wood's farm. Hopping over the fence, they crouched down in the corn, looking out towards the mine shaft. It was 5 minutes later they saw Grays marching up the hill, examining Silvertooth. A few went inside and inspected the area. Smoke was still billowing out, making their eyes water. Put those fires out, or else the whole mine will collapse. Get a word out to the mayor. It was dynamite, the captain of the guard ordered. What have you found? Showman blew up the right tunnel, sir. The right tunnel? Why would they do that? I don't know, sir, but the rest of the mine is fine. It's just the lower right tunnel. The captain began pacing around, grooming his mustache. Another soldier ran up to him from Bluto. Excuse me, Captain. The mayor's awake and would like a word. Thank you, Lieutenant. Take over operations here. I'll be back shortly. Groom Henry Wood's corn. Try not to make a mess. Odds are our criminals are hiding in those fields. I don't want to hear one complaint from Wood, and he's giving us enough slack as it is. Yes, sir, the lieutenant said as the captain took off down the trail towards the mayor's mansion. I need 5 men to groom the corn. 5 men stepped forward and marched towards the corn. First day after the lavender moon, and we got this. It took damn near all day to take care of those 2 dead bunny men, on top of tending to the questions killed and those injured. This town is going to shit. The lieutenant moved back towards the Silvertooth. Smoke was still billowing out as men and women ran up the hill with buckets of water. Shit. Come on, Rick said, moving deeper into the corn. The 3 of them ran for damn near 40 minutes. The sun was beginning to rise. They came around Henry's farm, leaped over the fence into the cow pens. They sprinted by standing asleep cows. 1 or 2 mooed at them as they sped past. They leaped over the fence into Red Asbury Farm. Jumping back into the corn, Red was out tending to his field as they tried their best to avert his gaze. Unfortunately, he heard them. Seeing his corn moving, he began to approach. They took one last turn onto the trail towards the Deborah River. Crossing the bridge, they stumbled back into the town. Turning on Bluto, they burst through the front doors of the Red Star and sprinted up the stairs. The 3 of them ran inside as Rick shut and locked the door behind them. Breathing heavily, he slowly walked over to his bed and collapsed. Skylar and Marfay sat on the opposite bed, staring at him, also catching their breath. What time is it? Skylar asked, nearly falling asleep. It's nearly 5 a.m., Rick said through mumbles in his pillow, his hands clutching his pocket watch. Rick, are you still going to meet the mayor? Marfay rose from their bed, walking over to him. I have to. It'll be suspicious if I don't show up. What if they find out it's you? You smell like dynamite, Marfay said while sniffing his head. I'll take a bath. After that, it'll be fine. I don't know, Rick. Skylar started to look out the window. The Greys are everywhere. Even if you take a bath, they'll be wondering why you're so tired. I'll sleep for an hour or so and be right as rain, Rick said, still talking through his pillow. Nothing you worry about. They'll never know. Rick, if they don't know how, they'll find out later. Marfay was starting to become frightened.
They killed Tobias the other day, and they attacked you when you purchased dynamite without a permit.
I told you guys this was the reason I'm here. I completed my task. Now I'm heading home. Rick started to laugh at the idea of heading home, as if it had been 40 years since he had left home.
How are you getting home?
Skylar asked, watching the Greys patrolling the streets. There's a storm coming, Rick said, falling asleep. Marfay and Skylar stared at him, puzzled.
Let him sleep,
Skylar said, staring out the window.
The Greys don't know he did it, and they don't know he's here. We'll wake him in an hour and help him out, so he doesn't get himself killed. What about Red Eye? What about him? Do you think he'll come after you? No, he doesn't know I exist. I'm sure he's still at Graham's. I might stop by after this ordeal and pay him a visit.
Skylar's hands wrapped around Red Eye's pistol, gripped the handle tight. The two of them dozed off for a short while. Marfay was the first to wake. It was a little past 7. She went downstairs to bring up some food. After she finished paying for it, she found the paper. Their picture covers the entire front page. Marfay and Skylar couldn't help but smile, and Rick was making a funny face. The photographer captured the very moment he understood how long it took to get your picture taken. Chuckling to herself, she made her way back upstairs. She opened the door slightly. Sounds of a loud commotion hit her at once. She didn't know what it was at first until she stopped dead in her tracks. Then, looking through, she saw Rick was up, as was Skylar. They were having sex louder than a colony of rabbits on Easter Sunday. Marfay could see Skylar's backside as she rode on top of Rick. Quietly shutting the door, Marfay stood for a moment, not knowing what to do, trying to ignore both of their moans while she gathered her thoughts. Then, taking the paper, she slapped it down in front of the door with the extra food she had ordered for them. Then, moving to the hatch that led to the roof, she opened it and climbed up. The sun was coming over the horizon. It was very beautiful. Marfay sat over the edge, looking down on Bluto. Calmly eating her toast and sausages, she didn't know how to feel or what to think. Emotions were overwhelming her, along with a slight jealousy. She pushed them aside, shaking her head as she furrowed her brow.
I don't know what I was expecting. Rick said he was leaving in a few days. For some reason, I just thought he would stay a little longer.
The wicked borrows but does not pay back, but the righteous is generous and gives.
Those cursed by him shall be cut off. Psalm 36:12, verses 21 and 22.
Marfay said solemnly under her breath. You found an old piece of yourself, then you tossed it away.
Do you feel Rick is wicked? Despite being a benefactor, he doesn't benefit you and instead gets you into more trouble. It's almost a curse for you to stay around him. If you get into trouble, odds are it's his fault. That's not true, and he saved my life, so I owe him a debt.
Have you paid that debt? Honey, when will it be enough?
The boy said he's leaving today. Let him leave. You'll get your fresh start and carve a new place in life. I don't want him to leave. You need him to leave. You want him to leave, Nathaniel. Why are you here?
I'm here because you're thinking about me.
You're not here because if you were, you'd be stuttering a storm.
I didn't always stutter. You remember that, don't you?
I do,
Marfay said as Nathaniel moved closer to her and placed his hand over hers.
This place isn't what we thought it was. They say there is a city of angels not too far away. They mostly speak Spanish, but it's this country's youngest city, and many say if you stop by, you'll get a big opportunities. A small slice of heaven for yourself. You can raise a family, live the way you want. You can forget about everything that has ever happened to you. You can make a new home, a new life, for the both of us. No, Nathaniel, you're not here. You're dead. That's what happened. I'm not leaving, and I'm going to help Rick as much as I can.
Nathaniel leaped backward, petrified of Marfay's deadly gaze.
I don't care if he's sleeping with that Quetchen girl. He saved my life, and he's a good friend. I'm going to help him get home today.
Will you help him get home at the cost of your own life?
If so, yes. We'll be even.
That's no way to live, Marfay.
But it's how I want to live. I've been searching for purpose in these old bones my whole life, and this feels right. What Rick is doing feels right, and if the cost is my life, so be it. I'd rather throw one last punch than give up and walk away. I'm better than that. You're better than that. You aren't the Nathaniel I loved. You're just an imposter.
I'm the only person who knows you.
And once Rick knows who you are, you think he'll like the sour bits you've kept from him? Do you think he could love you? I don't want him to love me. Oh, you do. I know you do. I can smell it on you. So you want to help Rick get home so you can put a bug in his ear to convince him to stay? What about that fine gentleman in yellow buckhorn, huh? I don't understand why you're limiting yourself. Go away, Nathaniel, please, go away. As long as you're alive, I'll never be separated from you. You made a vow. We are one that can never be undone. Go away, Marfay threw her plate at Nathaniel as it smashed onto the rooftop. Nathaniel was gone. Nothing but a cloud of dust remained. Coming to her senses, she stood up on the edge of the rooftop, looking down over the street. Standing on one foot, she lifted her other boot over the edge. Over nothing. One little slip, and she could tumble down. One tiny step would be all it would take to walk away from all the pain, all the suffering, and constant aching of Marfay Rosa Larissa. Hey, what are you doing? Startled, Marfay shook as if electrocuted. She waved her hands in the air, losing her balance. Shots from below on Bluetail began to yell up at her as they witnessed her nearly fall over the edge. Rick ran behind her and caught Marfay in the air, slowly sending her down. You don't smell like dynamite anymore, Marfay said, gasping for breath. What are you doing? Here, let me. Rick reached out and moved her glass eye so it was focusing on him with her real eye. Then, sending her down, she sat on the edge and braced herself. Are you all right? What's happening, Marfay? I have enough to worry about, and I don't want to see you leaping off of rooftops. I wasn't. Trust me. I was just goofing around, and, well, poor judgment. None of us have slept. Marfay started to laugh. I'm taking off for Bickerton now. I should be back shortly. Wait, should Skylar and I come with you? What if they... No, it will be fine. I'll step in, give them my alibi, and they'll let me go. Here, I have something for you. Rick reached into his pocket and pulled out the weather rings, placing it into her hands. He closed his fingers around it. Don't you need this? Not anymore. Rick smiled as he looked back at her. Now let's get back downstairs. Skylar has been looking everywhere for you. Also, someone gave us the paper. Our picture made the front page. I'm going to give that photographer a piece of my mind. He made me look like a schmuck. The two of them descended the ladder back onto the third floor. Marfay and Skylar watched Rick step onto Bluetar from the window. Then they watched him go down the alleyway between the barbershop and the journal. Both of them were tense, clenching their fists as they watched him disappear. Do you want to follow him? Marfay asked, slowly strapping on her boots. Yep. Skylar didn't even hesitate. She took off as Marfay struggled to catch up. The two of them hit the busy streets that morning as they maneuvered their way to the west side, towards the mayor's office. Curious why the mayor chose to live on the opposite side of the town, when asked, the mayor replied, How else can I greet every citizen of Mundosa first thing in the morning? It was a known fact that at 6 a.m. on the dot, you could catch the mayor strolling through the streets making his way to his office, and at 3 p.m., he was heading home, unless there was a boxing match. Slowly the streets were cleaned and repaired from the devastation they endured on the Lavender Moon. The Bunnymen corpses lay piled up outside the city gates to fuel the bonfires at sunset. Bunny steaks would be hitting the grills very soon. They made their way to the mayor's office when they rounded the corner to see the end of Cherry Oak. Only 2 houses needed repair, and blood stained the streets and brick walls. Corpses of pigs scattered the dirt. The few questions left had been making repairs all morning, along with a few grays. Those Bunnymen destroyed everything, Marfay couldn't avert her eyes. They didn't lock up their pigs, Skylar said, kicking some dirt. They brought it on themselves. Everyone knows the protocol for the Lavender Moon. Is your apartment near here? It's near Candace Butchery. I stopped by the other day to make sure no one had taken my pile of trash. The two of them stood outside the mayor's office, leaning on the building, waiting for the exact moment that Rick would be stumbling out. Please, have a seat. Make yourself comfortable, Mayor Bickerton said as he walked behind the desk and took a seat. The office was huge and full of little totems from other cultures. Knives and spears hung the walls, with framed documents from queens and princes. A few mounted deer heads were on the wall, with a moose head staring straight into Rick's soul. Rick couldn't take his eyes off of it. 2 grays stood outside the mayor's office doors as they spoke amongst themselves. That's a moose. Have you ever seen a moose before? I have, Rick said, trying to avert his gaze. So, Zandu, what's the occasion? Well, as you might know, there was a detonation this morning around 3 a.m. People believe it was dynamite, and, well, we have a record of you purchasing dynamite without a permit 2 days ago. Do you also have a record of the man who jumped me yesterday? We do, and we're also looking into that as well. Glad to know we're on the same page.
Rick rolled his eyes as he looked out the window. Are you familiar with this letter? Zandu leaned forward and handed Rick the letter that he wrote yesterday. Rick glanced at it and returned it. Nope. Who do you think wrote it? Unsure, but whoever did dropped 2 copies, one at the courthouse and one at my mailbox. I believe my maid saw you standing beside the deviant who delivered the letter. I disagree. I've been very busy with my writing. Writing? I didn't know you were a writer. Whom do you write for? Just a journal in Texas, a bit curious of the mythological Mundosa. I leave today since my contract is complete. You know what I think, Mr. Northwood? Bickerton removed his spectacle, dropping it into his front vest pocket. Then leaning forward, he eyed Rick with his left eye, almost as if the spectacle was holding back his rancor. I don't think you work for this Texas journal. I think you delivered this letter to help grant amnesty for your 2 friends. And I think you blew Silvertooth Mines this morning. A little early for accusations, don't you think? Never too early. I once condemned a man to the noose before 6 a.m. for rape and thievery. Well, that's an early start. What if I said I had some information that you would be interested in? Are you trying to parlay with me? No, I'm trying to help you. Those questions that gunned down your sheriff? I know they were on turquoise. What? I've never known turquoise to create such animosity. Doesn't happen if you smoke it. Happens if you drink it. The turquoise is a powerful drug that can manipulate your mind, possibly brainwash you to do things you don't recall doing. Even if this is true, what proof do you have they were under the influence? You'll get a specific odor if you drink it. Plus, people express very erratic behavior only to have no memory of what happened moments later. You seem to know a lot about this turquoise, Mr. Northwood. There is a drug ring in your town. People have died because of it. You want information? The sheriff knew, and they would have given you information on the turquoise. Too bad his blood is cold and in the dirt now. The Quetchins were patsies. Everyone in this town knows their history. It was the perfect cover-up. No one even batted an eye. Who wouldn't believe Quetchins killed the sheriff? You have some strong accusations, but do you have evidence? I don't have evidence. Where did the lavender tunnels go? The turquoise ring has not only been operating on your streets, they've been operating underground as well. Where do they lead to? There isn't a specific location. The tunnels connect to every building in case our town can't operate on the surface. So what are you trying to get at? I'm trying to say whoever has full access to your tunnels is using them to sell turquoise without your awareness. Not only selling it, but manipulating and brainwashing people to do whatever it is they're trying to accomplish. Mr. Northwood, I think I've heard enough. As I said, if you don't have evidence, I can help you in this fantasy of yours. Right now, you are on very thin ice, and once I have evidence, you will receive a subpoena. So I think you should be on your way. Thank you for meeting with me this morning. Zandu stood up from his desk and opened his office door, beckoning for Rick to leave. Rick stood up and hesitated. I know you have credence over what I said. I know you've seen it in your streets. Either you're afraid to do something about it, or you don't care enough about your people to try. Rick stormed out as Zandu stood for a moment at his desk. Then, taking a long breath, he shook his head and sat down. Pulling out a pencil, he scribbled down something he had to get off his mind. Rick stormed out, down the stairs as he kicked the door open from the newspaper office, jumping back onto Elmhurst. Rick! Rick! Marfay shouted as she and Skylar ran up to him. How'd it go? Skylar asked, looking up to his face as the 3 of them strolled toward the main street. Zandu can't do anything because he has no evidence, but he believes I'm behind it. I told him about the turquoise ring and how they killed the sheriff. The prick knows. He knows, and he's not doing anything about it. Rick was furious. I just told him everything. How he should start searching the tunnels, how people are killing themselves on the streets because of turquoise. The fucker knows, but he won't even try to do something about it. At least they aren't going to lock you up. Marfay couldn't help but hold Rick's hand. They would if they had evidence. Everyone is watching me. All those grays want me to slip up, but hey, is that? Rick stopped for a moment and stared out past them. Is that Aesop? The 3 stopped and stared as they saw Aesop round the corner of Cherry Oak, heading towards them. Is it me, or is he walking towards us? Skylar asked, reaching for a revolver. Let's get back to the Red Star, Rick gasped as he took off with Marfay and Skylar behind him. They ran to Main Street when Skylar stopped. Marfay looked back and saw she was frozen. Skylar! Rick yelled as he saw Aesop lumbering towards her. Marfay turned and saw what Skylar had locked in her sights. She stood frozen, staring at Graham's office.
On the front porch was Graham escorting a man. They looked half Blackfoot Indian, half Swedish. They had long raven hair with large, beautiful brown eyes, except their right eye looked a little red. They were tall and lanky, with large lips, high cheekbones, and a slight growth of a beard. Stumbling out, they saw Skylar staring. They stopped, perplexed, as Graham tried to figure out the situation. Skylar puffed out her chest, and she furrowed her brow. Then, running forward at a small trot, she ran towards Butch as they continued staring at her, unaware of what was happening. Skylar was a red bull blowing fire out of her nostrils. The devil was dancing in her eyes as she quickly became a Neanderthal, with thick, bulging muscles preparing to destroy her enemy. Pulling out Red Eye's pistol, she showed it to him, as she saw him recognize the gun. Quickly, his lips moved to form words. "That's my pistol." Pulling the hammer back, she aimed at Red Eye's head and smiled as she pulled the trigger. The moment she fired, Aesop knocked her aside from behind, sending her wrist to an upward angle, firing a shot into the sky as she somersaulted to the ground. Aesop shook the ground as he pulled out a very large pistol and fired at Rick, who leaped out of the way. Marfay whipped out both of her pistols and opened fire at Aesop. One bullet went right through his ribs as the other flew out all around him. Reaching out, Aesop snatched Marfay by the neck and threw her aside as she bounced off the ground. Rick reached down for his revolver on his hip when Aesop grabbed his hand, lifting him into the air. Screams left his mouth as Aesop quickly crushed the life out of him. A strange smell filled Rick's nose as he saw Aesop's eyes. They were frightening. The eyelids looked green in and out, as the pupils were crimson red with broken veins. Rick could feel his life quickly begin to leave him as his eyes rolled up in his head. People gathered as no one knew what to do. Ropes were suddenly tossed into the air, wrapped around Aesop's neck, arms, and shoulders. 15 Greys had managed to surround them, swinging rope. The Greys restrained Aesop, taking his pistol away. They threw him down. Aesop became pinned against the ground, with his hands tied behind his back. They pounded stakes into the ropes. Rick felt like a bag of fish as he gasped for breath. Skylar and Marfay slowly crawled to their feet. Graham had disappeared with Butch. No one had any idea where the two of them went. The captain of the guard approached Rick, helping him up as Zandu burst out of his office. "What the hell is happening? First thing in the goddamn morning. We're still recovering from the Lavender Moon. Aesop attacked Mr. Northwood here and his companions. I witnessed the whole event, and my men and I have restrained Aesop." Zandu walked over to Rick, who was conscious, being held by Marfay and Skylar. Bending his knee, he looked Rick in the eye. A large bruise now covered his throat from Aesop's chokehold. Lethargically looking up, Rick couldn't help but smile. "Are you all right, son?" "I'm fine." Rick took a staggered breath. "Please walk over Aesop right now and look at his eyes. Please, look at his eyes." Zandu stood back up and walked over to Aesop. Stakes pinned the beast down into the earth, blowing dust from his face as he fought the ropes like a feral bull. Zandu bent down and looked into Aesop's eyes. They were blood red. The eyelids were green, given a strange undead aura. There was a peculiar odor in the air that Bickerton had a tough time enduring, trying to find the best words to explain it. Standing back up, he walked to the captain of the guard. "Lock Aesop up. Keep guards posted him at all times. I want records made of his behavior hourly. We may have uncovered something." "Bring more Greys. We're transporting Aesop. I want all arms at the ready." The captain of the guard took off as more Greys flooded the street. Zandu returned to Rick, who was now standing with Marfay and Skylar. The three of them looked beaten up. Scratches and bruises covered them head to toe. Their eyes were seething in anger. "I apologize for what has happened to you, Northwood. You have my sympathies, but do not think this excuses you. As I said before, when evidence presents itself, you will be convicted. For now, you have my permission to leave." "Thank you," Rick said as he turned away. More Greys ran past him as Skylar and Marfay ran after Rick. "Rick, slow down," Marfay yelled as Rick picked up his pace. Skylar and Marfay were following him up Bluetoe as he was making his way back to Red Star. Bursting through the doors, Rick ran up to his room and started gathering his things. Notebooks, letters, little things he could put in his pockets. "Rick, talk to us," Skylar yelled, grabbing his hand as he yanked it away. "The two of you can have my silver. I won't be needing it." "Where are you going?" Marfay asked as she stood in the doorway, preventing him from leaving. "I told you when we met. My time here was ephemeral. It's time for me to go home." As Rick finished his sentence, they all suddenly heard thunder. Perfect timing. Rick pushed past both of them and took off down the stairs. They looked at each other and then ran after him, shutting the door behind them as they left. Rick was too fast. He walked back through the front doors of the Red Star and hit the street. Rick walked quickly with Skylar and Marfay running behind. The sky was growing black with thunderous clouds. Shadows began to cover the town as everyone started to move indoors. "Rick Northwood," a voice shouted as Rick stopped in his tracks. Behind him, at the end of the street, the Grays were busy transporting Aesop to the stone pocket. It nearly took all of them to strain him. 3 men stood on all sides of Rick, revolvers drawn. Rick lowered his hands towards his pistol grips. "What can I do for you, fine gentlemen?" Marfay and Skylar whipped out their revolvers, aiming them at the 3 strange men who had Rick cornered. "You can follow us right now, and we can take care of this ordeal without any bloodshed. Or we can call it out right here, right now. See who's left standing." The air stung like fire. Nothing but the wind whispered as everyone was ready to blast each other apart. Vigilant eyes glared at each other as they felt raindrops begin to spatter on their hats and shoulders. It quickly went from drops to sheets of rain pouring down on them. Rick looked up and smiled, lifting his arms a little as he let the rain hit his face. Then, laughing as the rain showered down on them, Rick holstered his gun and waved down Marfay and Skylar, who also holstered their revolvers. Then, sticking his arms outward, Rick walked towards them. "I will come willingly." As Rick finished speaking, 2 of the 3 men walked behind him, tying his hands together. They took his revolvers. The 4 of them walked down Blue Toe as everyone in Mundosa ran inside to get out of the rain. Thunder erupted from above as Marfay and Skylar quietly followed without giving too much notice. The Grays were still in the stone pocket, dealing with Aesop. The streets were clear. Of all people, no one had any inkling of what had occurred. All they knew was 4 people were walking down Blue Toe, with 2 others quietly following. After 20 minutes, the strangers had clandestinely led Rick through the northeastern gate. There were no guards. Not even the bell tower had anyone on duty. The 6 of them walked into the town graveyard. They passed old stones of Civil War veterans and some of the first people to ever live in Mundosa, along with those who didn't survive the journey. It was an eerie place. The yellow bark was daunting. Trees were so tall and thick that the spaces in between were inky darkness. Sounds of monsters growled, crawled, and shuffled about behind the yellow bark. It was a vile place, a reminder of how ephemeral human life could and always will be. At the very edge of the yellow bark stood a man. As far out, it wasn't easy to see who it was. What they could see was that he had rope. The 3 strangers didn't take much notice of Marfay and Skylar. Instead, taking the opportunity, they absconded into the graveyard. Hiding behind some gravestones, they found a better view of what was happening. Marfay dropped her jaw in polyexing disbelief as Skylar struggled to see. "What? What is it you see?" "I don't think you want to know. Rick is in the head of the turquoise ring." "The head?" "The boss." Marfay showed the whites of her eyes to Skylar. She looked as if she had seen a ghost. "I think we're at the center of the maze." Lightning crackled above them as Skylar looked up and gasped. The 3 gunslingers pushed Rick forward as an older man stood before him. Rope trailed up in the air over a high branch in a nearby tree, hanging down on the opposite side in a noose. Rick stood with bound wrists, looking down at the dirt for an answer. "You've made it in the center of the turquoise ring in only a few days. I'm impressed," called the voice of the old man. "What was your plan? Drain Mundosa of its wealth and people until you find another city to prey upon?" "I was, until you blew up the right tunnel. It's gonna be a while until we can mine turquoise again. For now, it'll just be a delay. One small hiccup to be remedied shortly. I've given the mayor proof of what you've been doing. It won't be long until he finds you and strings you up. You may have gotten rid of me, but I gave the word out about you. You'll have days left until they throw you into the desert with the bunnymen." "You seem very confident for a dead man," Ham said, stepping up to Rick, grooming his reddish-white beard as he pulled out a handkerchief to wipe down his porcelain bald head. Fixing his glasses, he looked back to Rick with a smile as he lit a rolled cigarette, blowing smoke into his face. "You seem confident for a rat caught in a trap." Rick couldn't stop smiling. "I think we've wasted enough time. Be grateful we're not butchering you like your friend Tobias Lodoff. German bastard thought this was a business you could walk away from. No one walks away from turquoise. Tobias's ignorance of how esoteric our business has been beyond embarrassing. String him up. We'll make a public example. Rick Northwood will take the fall as the leader of the turquoise ring. Once my men confirm your involvement and how you threatened to hurt them, we'll be able to continue our business on the ground. Soon enough, we'll get the right tunnel opened up, and business will be booming." The rain started to beat down on them harder as they stood soaked to the bone. Graham's 3 gunslingers grabbed hold of Rick and dragged him over to the noose as Rick fought back. His wet hair clung to his face as he screamed. The 3 of them held him down as they brought the noose around his neck. Behind his back were his bound hands, yet he wiggled like a fish. Rick fought as much as he could. Finally,
They moved to the other end of the rope and started to lynch Rick. Altogether, they yanked Rick up into the air as he gasped for breath.
Bastards, Marfay shouted as she pulled out a revolver and pulled back the hammer. Kill the three. Leave Graham alive. It'd be better if we can take him back to Xandu, Skylar said, removing her hand from Marfay's revolver. Rick was now strung up 10 feet in the air. Skylar and Marfay whipped out their guns and opened fire. Smoke blew from the ends of their barrels as one of the three fell dead with 3 bullet holes in his chest. Coughing up blood, he laid on his back. Staring up, he saw something. Extending his shaking arm, he pointed to the sky as his eyes rolled back. Falling backward into the dirt, he died as the rain continued to beat down on his blood-soaked body. The other two continued yanking the rope as Rick continued to asphyxiate. Graham pulled out from his coat a large rifle. Aiming at Marfay and Skylar, he cocked the gun and blasted them. A large chunk of gravestone blew off in pieces as Marfay and Skylar took cover. Stone rained on them as dust sprayed their faces. The two left holding the rope saw what their fallen companion had pointed out. A cyclone had appeared above them, quickly moving towards them. It blew their hats off as it took the form of a small tornado. Graham continued firing at Marfay and Skylar until he saw his men had let go of the rope. Standing, stupefied, Graham saw what they were looking at and nearly dropped his rifle. Then Marfay and Skylar heard the gunfire cease as they popped their heads over the remains of the gravestone. Rick was still dangling high in the air, but not by the noose around his neck. The rope was slacked, hanging like a U as Rick hovered in the air. A small twister had consumed him, and his hair flowed in all directions as his clothes nearly tore off his body. Looking up, Rick was smiling as he looked to Marfay and Skylar. Their eyes met. He gave a wink of valediction before lightning struck his chest. It was loud, deafening their ears as the bright light blinded them. Shielding their faces, they looked back to see the twister had vanished, as had Rick. All that remained was the noose still hanging from the tree, limp. The rain had stopped. The sun started to shine upon them. The noose swung in the breeze as the middle part had caught fire. Bits of ash and flaming rope rained down on Graham and his men. Marfay and Skylar couldn't move. They couldn't process what had happened. Instead, laughter consumed them in perplexity, unable to grasp the reality that Rick had just floated into the air and vanished.
Did Rick ever say where he was from?
Skylar asked, holding her ribs as they burned.
No. He always avoided the question. Over and over again, he would say he was from far away. I don't think he's from anywhere. I think he's from somewhere in time. A different time?
Skylar burst out laughing.
I thought he was square for a white fella.
Square is just putting it nicely. Marfay laughed as another gun blast came their way. They dipped their heads down as the gravestone they hid behind nearly blew to pieces.
I can see the two of you over there. Come out now. Drop your guns and keep your hands up.
Should we give them some fire to dance to?
Marfay smiled, cocking the hammers on her pistols.
Let's give them a show.
Skylar smiled as Marfay and her jumped up and blasted them. But unfortunately, Graham's 2 gunslingers were too slow when reaching for their pistols. As a result, the gunslingers were blown to pieces as they fell backward, clawing the air. Graham dropped his rifle and ran deep into the yellow bark. He was crying for his life as he whimpered like a quilled mutt. Marfay and Skylar ran up to the noose. First, they looked up at the noose as their eyes drifted to Graham running deep into the yellow bark. Then, keeping the revolvers up, Skylar reached out and held Marfay back.
Don't. He's in the yellow bark now. No point in going in there. The yellow bark has him.
The two of them heard a terrifying scream, followed by the sounds of monsters in the dark, growling, clawing, and biting from within the yellow bark. They both looked up at the noose. It was still swinging in the air with a bit of fire where the lightning had struck. The rope had burned away into 2 pieces, slowly unwinding from the tree.
I hope this means he went home, Marfay said, sighing a little. He's home. He said he was going home.
Skylar wrapped her arm around Marfay's shoulder. Let's have a drink before any Greys see us here.
Chapter 6. Sidewinder Tears. Before the Greys covered the place, Skylar and Marfay snuck into the Yellow Buckhorn. Grabbing a table near the back, the two of them sat and drank as Henry served them. Anything else? Henry hesitated, as he wasn't sure if they heard him. Marfay couldn't help but stare at him, with a smile on her face. The two of them were still dripping wet, as they took their hats off, trying to wring them dry. Then Skylar hit Marfay in the shoulder, snapping her out of it.
That will be all. Thank you, Henry.
Marfay couldn't help but keep smiling. Henry nodded his head and returned to the bar. Skylar shook her head in disappointment as she gulped her drink.
He's only been gone an hour, yet it feels like a year.
Marfay played with her cup as she took a sip. Then reaching into her pocket, she pulled out Rick's weather device. Taking it by her pointer and thumb, she twisted it on the tabletop as Skylar and her watched it spin like a coin. First spinning at rapid speed, then slowing down and flopping over flat on the table. I'm surprised he left this to you, Skylar said, bending over and picking it up, then slowly examining the rings as she continued sipping her whiskey. Rick told me he didn't need it anymore. Can you make it do the whizzy thing with the bright lights and such? No, I don't think I can. I have no idea how it even works. Well, maybe you'll figure it out later on. Skylar slapped the rings on the table and slid them back over to Marfay. Henry returned to Marfay and Skylar, procuring them 2 additional drinks. What's this? Skylar looked at the drinks and darted her eyes back to Henry. We didn't order these. Compliments from a young fellow who's requesting to join you for a brief moment. Henry moved away, revealing Red-Eye Raven behind him. Skylar froze. Her hand was whipped to her pistol, despite the fact her barrel was empty. She clandestinely reloaded the pistol under the table. Marfay darted her eyes at Skylar and then back to Red-Eye. I was recently told you are Blue Cheek, from one of the Quechan tribes deep in the Yellow Bark. Butch brushed his raven hair back as he fixed his lapel, trying to look presentable. Sitting up straight as he took his seat, Marfay could see several scars on his fingers and arms while resting his long, lanky hands on the tabletop. Some were black powder scorch marks, and others looked to be aged knife wounds. Butch didn't realize it, but he was subconsciously tapping the tabletop as he spoke. What business do you have with me? Skylar finished reloading Red-Eye's pistol and slowly pulled the hammer back under the table, aiming it straight for his gullet. Reaching into his coat pocket, he pulled out a canteen and slid it over the table. Polyxed, Skylar picked the canteen up and looked inside. There was a strange green stain throughout the interior. An odd odor expelled out of the canteen's mouth, making Skylar wince and cough a little. Before the events of the massacre, I was drugged. It was months later I learned that the drug was turquoise. Marfay reached over and snatched the canteen from Skylar, examining it herself. She also gagged at the odd smell. You were drugged? Skylar asked as she reset the hammer, lowering her pistol. I don't remember what happened. I remember coming back to Mundosa and hearing what happened by a small Quechan family a few days later. It took me a while, but I quickly put together what happened. After a few years of drinking and guilt, I tried to kill myself for the penance of my crimes. I willingly entered the Yellow Bark. Despite my doubts, I survived and managed to hitch a ride back during the Lavender Moon. Within a short time of being back, I learned a single Quechan survived the massacre. She had moved to Mundosa 3 years ago to seek vengeance, to find me and kill me for what I had done to her entire family, to her entire tribe. I know you have my pistol aimed at me under the table, and I thought I'd make a little proposal. What kind of proposal would that be? Skylar lifted Red-Eye's pistol and placed it on the tabletop before them. Butch shook a little at the sight of the pistol, doing his best to avert his gaze. Then, reaching into his pocket, he pulled out a silver key. He slid it across the tabletop. The key is to a safety deposit box in the town bank. Throughout my life, I've had a habit of gambling in Diamondback. Every cent in that deposit box is yours. I know it can't bring back your family or your people, but I hope it can help mend the life that I took from you. I'm so sorry. Butch struggled to wipe away tears. I hope the both of you have a nice evening. Red-Eye stood up as a raven flew across the room to his shoulder and perched there as he walked back to his wife. She stood at the front doors. She was a Blackfoot Indian. Their face was round, with 2 long brunette braids coming down on both sides of her head to her chest. Long beaded earrings jingled from her lobes as thick lips and round brown eyes stared off to Red-Eye. She smiled as he returned to her. Marfay turned to Skylar, and her hands were shaking. The pistol remained on the tabletop. Moans fell from her mouth as Marfay placed her arm around her. Skylar, are you all right? It's over. Do you want to get out of here? Tears flowed down, soaking her cheeks as her bloodshot eyes looked back up. She struck her fist against the tabletop as the sound reverberated off the walls. The saloon was so loud and busy, no one noticed except Marfay. She saw the knuckles of Skylar's fist grow white as she reached for the pistol.
Fucker thinks he can just pay me off and walk away.
Skylar cocked the hammer.
Marfay reached down and grabbed Skylar's hand. Don't, Skylar, not here. I hope the spirits of my tribe torture you until you plead for hell.
Skylar aimed and shot Butch as the entire bar screamed at the sound, taking cover under their tables. The raven that rested on his shoulder took off, flying through the doorway. The bullet hit Butch in the shoulder, spraying his blood on the glass window of the doors. Leaning, he caught his breath as his wife reached into his coat and pulled out the twin revolver to the one Skylar held. With impeccable speed, she flipped the revolver up, pulled the hammer, and fired at her. Falling backwards, Skylar clawed at her chest as she fell onto the bar floor. Red Eye's wife helped Butch out the door as they absconded down the alley. Marfay fell to her knees and held Skylar as grays filled the yellow buckhorn.
What is happening here?
The captain of the guard officiously announced, unaware of Red Eye and his wife sneaking past them.
Red Eye Raven, someone shouted from the back. Shot Blue Cheek here. He just ran down the alley.
5 of you stay here and tend to Blue Cheek. The rest of you follow me.
The rest of the Greys followed their captain out the door as 5 ran over to attend Skylar. Where were you hit, Mrs. Blue Cheek? Do you need a doctor? One of the Greys asked as 5 of them took a knee next to Skylar Marfay. Blood poured from Skylar's lips and chest as Marfay rained tears onto her cheeks.
I'm sorry. I couldn't help it. I've enjoyed our time together. Don't talk, Skylar, please. We'll get someone soon. My spirit feels cleansed, yet I'm not around her. I'm gonna die now. I'll tell Rick you miss him.
Skylar closed her eyes for the last time as Marfay held her. The Greys gave her a moment. She wouldn't let go of Skylar. Finally, after 15 minutes, her hands loosened their vice grips as the Greys took care of Skylar and escorted Marfay home. She took the key to Red Eye's deposit box, along with his pistol and Rick's weather rings she had left on the table. They had to get another set of keys since Rick took the only copy they had. The Greys were kind enough to take care of the deed for her. Marfay was silent and numb. She didn't say a word as her eyes glazed over, revealing how empty she had become inside. They helped her into her room as she sat on the bed, gave her their condolences as they shut the door behind them. Marfay stared out the window at the sparkling stars with Red Eye's pistol laying in her hands. Tears fell down her cheeks as she rolled over and fell into the deepest sleep of her life. Marfay woke up at 9 a.m. the next day. Her body was stiff. Pulling the chain to the tub, she took a quick bath. She ate some breakfast, scrubbed her teeth, and even washed her glass eye. Gathering her things along with Rick's silver, she said her last goodbyes to the Red Star. Returning the key up front, she went to the bank and took Butch Jenkins' deposit box. It held some cash, some foreign coins, and mostly diamonds. Half the box was diamonds, which Marfay now understood they mainly gambled with at Diamondback. Taking all the silver and diamonds, she went to the stables and asked for Rick's horse. Paying them their fee, she saddled up and prepared to hit the road. She was taking one last stop at the Prickly Peach. Tying her horse outside, she stepped inside. Taking off her hat, she found a seat and ordered a drink with a plate of food. Although the peach-colored walls made her head hurt, she averted her eyes and kept her gaze down. Heavy boots walked towards her as someone pulled out the chair next to her and sat down. I was drinking across the room, and I saw you come in. I thought for a moment that it couldn't be you. Marfay doesn't even look like that. I gained a little longer, and it hit me. That's the young lady I attended the theater with the other night. Yet I can't help but feel as if I'm seeing someone else. I think it might be because I've been reading about you in the journal all morning. Hi there, Roger. Marfay lifted her eyes and smiled at him. How's your morning going? She finished eating her food and pushed her plate aside. Then digging into her coat, she slapped a silver coin on the table. Seems to be going better than your morning. I've dealt with a lot over the past few days. I'm hitting the road. I've seen enough blood here. How would you feel about a job proposition? Who's asking? Marfay finished her whiskey as she fidgeted with her glass eye. Goes by Stargazer. He's a captain on the high seas and is always looking for recruits. especially recruits as savvy as yourself. You can tell this stargazer I'm not interested. I think I need to be on my own for a while. Figure out what it is I want to do with my life. This offer doesn't expire. If you decide to change your mind, just be by the Los Angeles ports. We stop there a few times a year. Porter reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a blank card, writing an address on it. Then sliding it over, he smiled and got up from his chair. It was a pleasure meeting you, Maffei. I hope you find what you're looking for. Porter took off to the bar, paid for his drink, and left. Why not stay here? You could probably make a little more than that small fortune you already have. If there's anyone left from the turquoise ring, they'll be after me. Some of them know my face from spending so much time with Rick. You killed their leader. I'm sure they're all running around like chickens with their heads cut off. Stay a while, maybe gamble a bit. I think you need time to relax. Think things over. Nathaniel, enough. You always go against everything I try to do. Then what is it? Nathaniel pounded his fist against the tabletop, losing his temper. What is it you want? Because I don't know anymore. I've been trying to figure that out damn near my entire life. I want you to leave, Nathaniel. Maffei began to cry as she took a deep breath and approached the following words with equanimity. I love you so much, but I can't move on if you don't let me go. Nathaniel, please. You always be the love of my life. We've shared so many beautiful moments, but I can't keep doing this. You are dead, and I am alive, so I have to let you go. I'm sorry. You always be the love of my life. Goodbye, Nathaniel. Don't do this, Maffei. If you leave Mundosa, you leave me behind forever. We are one that can never be undone. That's the way it has to be. Without another word, Maffei got up and left. Going outside, she untied Rick's horse, double-checked her bags. She checked for Rick's sleeping bag, tent, provisions, water. She had everything she needed, even a few more rounds of bullets she had grabbed earlier that morning from the gunsmith. Maffei took one last glance through the window and saw Nathaniel still sitting at the table. Raising a glass, he looked at her and smiled. She turned away and wrapped her legs around the saddle. Riding off down Cherry Oak, she approached the sign to Sidewinder Tears. It shook and creaked in the wind as she stopped, yanking the reins, hesitating for a moment. The wind blew in her hair as her leather hat struggled to stay on her head. The horse stomped its hooves in protest, making a fuss as Maffei kept him still. I think it's a pirate's life for me. Hee-yah! Maffei slapped the reins as she rode up Sidewinder. Every minute climbing Sidewinder rewarded her with an ethereal view of Mundosa. When she reached the precipice of the mountain, she tossed Nathaniel's revolver to the dunes below, the gun quickly disappearing into the sands. She felt an overwhelming euphoria wash over her as peace settled within. Now we are undone, Maffei said. Then yanking the reins, she turned back onto the trail, riding through the mountains. Mundosa fell behind her as she rode into the setting sun. The end. I just want to thank you all for listening to my first audiobook, Mundosa. And please, 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 if you can, run on over to Amazon and write a review of your thoughts and feelings on the first journey that we took together. And if you'd like to see some short films, feel free to look up The Rancid Rabbit and Redshank on my YouTube channel, Shukenstein. That's Shukenstein. I hope to see you again. Thanks for stopping by. And just a little preview of coming attractions. I am including Red Eye Raven in a chapter in my current book, Gladys. And my 10th book that is coming up, Gladys is my 9th. My 10th book is all about Mundosa. It is going to be a prequel taking place 10 years prior. And Red Eye Raven, Butch Jenkins will be returning. And that's all I know so far. I've been outlining it for a long time. After I wrote and published this book on Amazon, I actually moved back home for a year and a half in upstate New York, Cherry Valley, New York. And I saved a lot of money, and I moved back February of last year, 2022. And it's officially been a full year back in Los Angeles as a working actor and writer. I hope you enjoyed this audiobook. I have more audiobooks I'd like to do, and I'm considering starting a short story audiobook podcast on my YouTube channel, so stay tuned. I hope you enjoyed this tale, and of course, don't spoil the mystery, but please set out for the sunset, and I hope you have a wonderful evening.